This sitting is resumed. Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this resolution very, very, very fervently, sir, because as a youngster growing up with my grandmother, sir, we had a nice little piece of land next to us in Grisettes. And in the 80s, sir, before the advent of the conveniences of supermarkets and automarts and these types of things, sir, that small piece of land that my grandmother worked, and I recall, sir, as a youngster, having to take out the sheep in the morning before going to school and bringing them in, sir, in the evening, that the importance of being able to protect, sir, the hard work of all persons who take the time, sir, to grow for themselves, that this piece of legislation, sir, is absolutely critical, because particularly in these very challenging times, it's important that we send a very, very, very clear signal, sir, to all and sundry, that as a society, as a government, sir, and to the extent our responsibility as citizens to each other, that we must always find ways, sir, to ensure that, one, we can enfranchise people, that when people work hard, sir, to support themselves and their families, that they have the full protection, sir, of the law with respect to being able to recover that which they have worked to produce. What I'm especially reminded, sir, as similarly still a young man, there's that famous song, sir, everybody wants to, nobody wants to plant the corn, sir, but everybody wants to raid the barn. And Anthony B., sir, sings that very lustily. And it is particularly relevant in this context because it would appear to some parts of the society, sir, that people would want to reap not what they sow, but what somebody else perhaps has sown, sir, and it is just simply wrong. And I say so, sir, in the context that over the course of the last 2 years, the pupils at Milton Lynch, sir, in my constituency, the boys, started just before the pandemic hit, sir, they started a small, they took a patch in the school, created a little garden, sir, and during a tour with of the school just a few weeks ago, the principal informed me, sir, that they had to purchase, sir, $2,200 worth of razor wire, sir, to erect on top of the fencing to try to prevent people, sir, from stealing the produce which the boys at Milton Lynch, under the supervision of their teachers, sir, over the last 2 years, worked so hard to be able to do. Now, I said to myself, who, sir, who in their right mind, seeing a very positive project which will teach young boys, sir, the importance of being able to do farming in a very small space, because I think it's important that we signal to all and sundry, sir, that we can do agriculture in small spaces, in large spaces. But I asked myself, who will steal, sir, the produce from young boys, young students in this country? And I still can't fathom that, sir. But the school had to spend $2,200, not in buying more seeds or to expand the garden, not in buying more fertilizer, sir, but $2,200 in order to try to prevent people from stealing the produce of the school. And that alarmed me, sir, which is why as I stand here in this debate, even though I didn't want to make it clear, that small project was not necessarily what you might call commercial quantities, but they were doing it, sir, not just to teach the youngsters good agricultural practices, but as a source, sir, of revenue for the school, to be able to help sell the produce to parents and those in the community, to help the school, sir, create a little bit of an income as an independent stream, sir, with respect to production for the school. And I know that a number of other efforts have been brought to bear across the country. And that is why, sir, that this bill is important, not just as a piece of legislation, but to emphasize to all in the country that if we are truly in this together, sir, we can't be stealing and thieving, sir, the produce that the little boys work so hard at the school to produce. Because imagine the disappointment, sir, that, and I use this example, sir, because I'm a man, sir, I like my cuckoo. And when my grandmother had the okra trees, sir, when the little yellow flower started to come out, I know that the okra's ready. And the truth is, sir, I've lost that little bit of a green thumb these days. But there are some people who, when they are traveling through the country, sir, will see the lush vegetation, and like myself, for the most part, sir, ignorant of the ripening stage of most agricultural products. But there are clearly some amongst us who, when they visualize and they look across the country, they know when and what time to come back, sir, in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night. And no, this is a serious matter, sir, because whilst for the unsuspecting eye, there are those among us who knows exactly when, sir, to strike. And that type of thought process, sir, that type of cynical approach is something that we need to root out in this country. What I would say, sir, is that we need to teach, yes, our children about, yes, the importance of the growing cycle, when things are right and when they are not, sir, when they are ready to be harvested or not. These are important skills because I support this bill not just in the context of the protection of agricultural products, but in helping to build out amongst the young people in this country a level of expertise, sir, a level of expertise that would see us being able to maximize the yields of the small kitchen garden that you may have, sir. If you got a little quarter acre, half acre, or an acre that you have some family land, sir, to put down, that you can do so, and that the Ministry of Agriculture and the agencies that support can come out and provide the extension service to that, in order to ensure that, sir, that we can, as a country, starting at the community level, start to ensure that we can achieve food and nutritional security, which is part of the mandate of the Ministry of Agriculture, so that we can understand truly, sir, what food security really means at the household level, what it means at the community level, as well as at the national level. And therefore, yes, sir, we must teach our children and everybody those fundamental tenets of agricultural practice. But not those tenets, sir, that will see people coming in the middle of the night to steal the produce, therefore leaving disappointment, sir, not just for the fact that it's gone, but people, sir, would have made an investment. And if we are going to create a cohesive society, sir, then we must have in place a regime that holds to account, sir, those persons who are stealing the agricultural produce, selling them on, sir. And I know that we've spent quite a bit of time trying to emphasize to persons that before you purchase anything from somebody, they must, in my view, sir, be known as a bona fide farmer, producer in the space, unless you're some legitimate intermediary, sir, with respect to being able to do so that we can be assured, sir, that the produce being put into the market is credible, and I use the term credible in the context of being able to validate, sir, that these tomatoes, sir, or these okras, or whatever came from my ground next to my house at X time. Which brings me to the point, sir, that as a country, we must not be afraid, sir, to indicate to whether it's the Ministry of Agriculture when we are planning certain things. Because at the end of the day, if the government is to put an effective framework in place to respond to these critical matters, then you can't, you know that old saying, sir, you can't hide and buy land, and obviously, you can hide and buy land, sir.
Can't hide and work it.
But you can't hide and work it. But, well, even though hiding, anyhow, sorry. The reality is there's too much secrecy, sir, amongst our communities, and making that information available is going to be important for helping us to reinforce or to enforce any legislation that we pass. And therefore, if I have a quarter acre, sir, in Oakers, then, I must be able to share that information with the appropriate authorities, knowing that I planted it, sir, X time ago, and it will come into the reaping season. And if we're able to do so, sir, then collectively working together, I believe that farmers banding together, sir, that if I got my ground here and you got your ground over there, sir, that we can work together to make sure that we, at the appropriate time for reaping, that we can, because we have a vested interest in getting our products to the market in a viable way, that we work collaboratively in order to make sure that we can see the yields that we want to see, and that we can recoup that investment in a way that makes sense. But it's only going to work, sir, if we work collaboratively together. And I say to those persons who, if you want to steal from that ground, no, sir, you got to go. You got to go over the barbed wire fence. But a primary school, sir, should not have to spend $2,200 buying barbed wire to protect the produce for young boys who we want to support getting into agriculture and to understand the habits of it, sir. And therefore, we must work together to stamp out this very, very vexing issue of food security. What I want to also indicate, sir, is that this piece of legislation is going to be, in my mind, critical for allowing us to be able to build a platform, sir, with respect to not just achieving food security, but equally being able to ramp up production to such a level that we are capable, sir, of ensuring that we can meet any export targets and contracts that we may have. And therefore, this stealing that is taking place is really a hurdle, a disincentive to us being able to achieve food security in the first instance, but equally being able to build a platform with respect to export of agricultural products in a very meaningful way. And if we are going to address issues in relation to whether it is cost of living, food security, and the like, sir, then we need to make sure that we work together, community by community, in order to be able to support this so that we can assure that any person making the sacrifice of being able to put their energies into agricultural pursuits, that we can ensure that there's a system that would allow for not just the tracking and the tracing of agricultural products, but being able to hold people to account. I want to move quickly, sir, to a few observations which I want to share with the Chamber, and permit me, sir, to be able to speak on this very quickly. As we continue to face issues relating to global food prices and fuel and the like, sir, and I know that in Barbados, as I told you, sir, I started out with a piece of land with my grandmother in Grisette, sir, and we were working it. We have moved now to a stage where, and as I told you, sir, I used to take out the sheep in the morning, and that was before they had these issues of covenants and these types of things coming in to place now, sir, where you got a piece of land, and the covenant said that you can't do this, and you can't do the next, and you can't do the third. And I want to say, sir, that I believe it is time that we move to a different level in this country. I've seen technology introduced, sir, where it is entirely possible, and I know I've seen the Ministry of Agriculture, or at least agricultural companies in this country, put out, what I would describe, sir, as pens for rabbits, pens for chickens that are linked, in a sense, sir, to your water system, so that the smells and those types of things are no longer of the nature of what we perhaps would have done 30 or 40 years ago, sir. Such that in a residential community, a person could rear a few chickens, you could rear some rabbits, sir, without running afoul of these covenants. Because in these times, sir, I believe it is important that we use the technology that's available to us in order to ensure that the average person, whether you're in a terrace or heights or whatever it is, sir, that you're able to effectively feed yourself if you want to address the issues in relation to help address the issues in relation to cost of living, and to get back, as you say, sir, to the days when you planted a few things in your backyard, allowing us to be able to feed ourselves. It certainly would help improve with respect to implementation issues in relation to food security. And I would love to dearly see that the Ministry of Agriculture, sir, takes a very clear and aggressive look in this particular area, because I believe it is important that we are able to utilize these technologies, allowing households across the length and breadth of the country to be able to feed themselves. I know, sir, that with all of the development taking place, and I've always been intrigued, sir, when people will go and purchase land, sir, next to a pig farm or something, and then complain that somebody's keeping pigs in the area. It don't make sense. It don't make sense. Except to say, sir, that I was doing some work, sir, a few years ago, and I had occasion to visit a pig farm somewhere in Antigua, sir. I don't remember exactly where. But the entire ecosystem of the pig farm, sir, you could not tell that this was a pig farm. Everything was fully integrated. The rainwater harvesting, the biodigester, everything, sir, was integrated in such a way that you had development taking place around it, but you would not know that there was a pig farm. And I'm saying to agriculture practitioners, I'm saying to the country, sir, that how we develop agricultural practices going forward, we have to modernize and get with the program, sir. Because Barbados has a limited land space. We still have to grow stuff. We still got to be, and sir, I know that you're not necessarily familiar with the pig as I am, but there are still some amongst us who, for whatever reason, eat meat. We are also pursuing other aspects with respect to agriculture and the like across the country. And therefore, as we do these interventions, sir, I believe that we have to look at different ways for how we support pig farming, poultry farming, and these types of things, sir, whilst protecting them from being stolen. I know we always hear in the middle of the night, and the truth is, sir, you and I both know that when we hear reports of cows and sheep being mutilated in the middle of the night, sir, and I use the term deliberately because you're not just mutilating by teething it, but there are not many people, sir, that can carve up a cow or sheep in the middle of the night. That is a skill, sir, that is extraordinary. And therefore, we must find ways of working together, sir, in a cohesive manner that allows communities to be able to feed themselves, allow the persons who are doing, whether it is the animal husbandry, the actual food crop production, to be able to protect their investment. And therefore, my support of this bill, sir, it goes beyond just what is here, but I believe that we have to find a way now, sir, to ensure that for our existing farmers, that we can allow them to upgrade their operations to meet the latest sanitary and phytosanitary standards, to allow for more investment to come into the space, more employment in the space. And sir, I can tell you, just from that little project at Milton Lynch, there are a lot of youngsters now who are getting a keen interest in the area of agriculture. But you can't maintain that interest if adults, sir, going in when the night come and thieving the little boys' produce. It's simply wrong. And therefore, as a society, we've got to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, who would steal from a child, sir? Really, who would steal from a child? And if you can steal from a child, it means that you can thief from anybody, sir. And therefore, we must act responsibly. Whether you're any business owner, I believe, should have a moral obligation, sir, plus legal obligation, to be able to ask anybody who's coming to them, sir, to sell them something, where they get it from. Are you a farmer? Are you a registered farmer? Where did you get this thing from? Because if we want to build a proper agriculture industry, sir, if we want to ensure that people can feed themselves and we get the right level of nutritional security within our system, that we must do this, yes. But I believe that by the same token, that as we navigate what certainly will become, what appears to be uncertain times ahead, that we must find innovative ways now, sir, of being able to go into communities, put in the right responses with respect to technologies, whether that it is the rabbit pens or the chicken pens, sir, that are properly structured in a way that allows people to do some very small scale rearing of these animals in a clean way, no smell as is the case. Then I believe, sir, that we will be doing right, not just by our constituents, but I think by the country as a whole, by it being able to help us to be able to mitigate against the rising costs of food, and be able to respond in a way, sir, that makes absolute sense. And therefore, we must all work together, sir. I know the Minister of Agriculture and those have been working very hard to ramp up production all across this country. We can see the investment going in there, sir. And the last thing I would want to happen is that people getting their hopes up. People want, even up to this morning, someone from my constituency messaged me about some lands that they want to get from BADMC, and therefore people want to get into commercial agriculture. And therefore, when you get people into this process and they put in the investment, they may go to the trust loan program or some other program to get some resources, sir. We want that when they go through the, whether it's 6-week crops, 12-week crops, animal husbandry, sir, that those persons can get a return on that investment so that they can hire 2 or 3 people, sir, from in the very constituency or community area, sir, that they're in, to help support themselves and their families. And therefore, we see this as a critical response, because there's nothing that will deter somebody, sir, than 5.5 weeks from now after I plant my carrots, sir, and when they come up there, sir, everything gone. And therefore, we must work together as a country to ensure that we have the right systems and the right checks in place to be able to protect people. Now, the Minister of Agriculture introduced this bill superbly this morning, and I know that with the kind of attention to detail that the ministry is bringing to bear with respect to these facets, I know, sir, that we can get out of the situation that we're in by being able to enfranchise people right across the length and breadth of this country. The work that we're doing, sir, strategically with Guyana and Suriname to respond to the challenge that the Prime Minister put to the region to reduce our agricultural imports by 25% by 2025. I know that we can do it. But we can only really do it, sir, and bring people along if people stop thieving when the night comes, sir, with respect to agricultural products. And that's the harsh reality, sir. That's the harsh reality, because this type of response that the government has put in to agriculture in a very meaningful way, wanting not just to bring opportunity to people, But by being able to build on that platform where we can achieve food security, the next level, sir, is in relation to sanitary and phytosanitary legislation to be able to help ensure that we can export, whether it is crops or meat, any meats, fish, if you like, sir, outside of Barbados, that we can meet those standards, have them traced right through to the farm, and to know, sir, how much fertilizer you put in the ground, how much antibiotics you might have given to the animals. These are the kinds of things, sir, in terms of information sharing that I refer to, that as a community, we must be able to come and say that I grew these things, I reared these animals in this way, that allows the brand of Barbados to be capable of exporting globally so that everybody can benefit, sir, within the context of this thing. And here's the thing, sir. As I told you, I think I lost my little green thumb. So if somebody, sir, knows when the carrot's right, well, just come and tell me, Ryan, the carrot's right. And if you let them stay in the ground too long, then obviously the yield is not going to be as good because you left them in too long. And this is the kind of information, sir, that I believe that those persons who are out there in the middle of the night, sir, can share with people who are interested in getting in the space, sir. And I say this in all sincerity, sir, because obviously these people have knowledge that you or I, sir, don't. And if I wanted legal advice, sir, I would come to you. You're a lawyer. And all I'm saying, sir, is that we have to find a way to harness collectively the skills of the agriculturalists in this country to be able to provide advisory services, if you like, sir, to people who want to get into these spaces in a way that allows them to be able to make the investment and to do that, sir. Because at the end of the day, sir, we want more investment to come into the space. We want people to be confident that if I plant a quarter acre of tomatoes, sir, that I can get a quarter acre's yield of tomatoes, sir, in 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever the period is, sir. And that if I have to pay somebody, sir, to make sure that that happens, then you do that. And therefore you create, sir, a business climate. Because this is not just about feeding ourselves, but we can also create a business climate, sir, that would allow for a reasonable return of investment to take place. But the only way, sir, that could happen is that, one, we don't deter the youngsters when they're at primary school, sir, from getting involved in this thing. Because if the only experience was that when it came time to reap, sir, there was nothing there, then they will not be interested in that going forward. And we need our young people, sir, to reconnect in a real sense to agriculture production in this country. And this government, sir, intends to support programs that will facilitate that, whilst at the same time putting the other structures in place, not just to achieve food security, not just to achieve, sir, nutritional security, but to put the Barbados economy on a sustainable path whereby the export potential, the agro-processing potential, to reduce the imports that people keep talking about, sir, in the country. The only way that happens is if people work collaboratively and cooperatively with the Ministry of Agriculture, the farming community, all of the producers and the people making these critical investments that allows them to know that in 6 weeks, sir, 12 weeks, 3 months, whatever the time frame is, that they will be able, sir, to reap what they sow. And I fully support this bill, sir, absolutely. And I can only say to the Minister of Agriculture, continue to do the wonderful work that he is doing, because I believe that this will be one of the critical interventions, sir, that working together, community by community by community, would allow us to build confidence within this particular space and to turn what has been a very bad habit, a nasty habit, sir, that has developed over time. I believe that we can turn this into a positive for the country by being able to work collaboratively with the Ministry of Agriculture, providing the information that is required to be provided to help build a robust system that would allow not just government to go out and negotiate the business, the contracts and the business interests that we want to help develop in the country, but it would mean that ordinary Barbadians, sir, whether you're in Kingston, sir, or Waterhall land, that if you want to get a quarter acre, whether in Lears or River or wherever in your backyard, sir, and you can reach a reasonable commercial scale, that you can realize that investment, meet the standards that are intended to be met, and that you can support your family, sir, that you become part of a farming and business community that is cohesive, that allows us, sir, to be able to achieve the food and agriculture security that we know that we need to meet. And so, sir, with those few words, I am obliged to you. Thank you.
Honourable City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, I stand at this time to lend my support to this Protection of Agriculture Produce 2022 bill. In reading this bill, sir, in going through the brief, sir, one thing came to mind as I read line after line after line. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that was the voice of the farmer. I was hearing the voice of the farmer coming through. As the Minister of Agriculture said this morning, one of the things that disturbed him about the past bills were the fact that not only did they sought to humbug the farmer, but they did not seek consultation with the farmer. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I go through this bill, this 2022 bill, I am happy to report that I can see evidence of the fact that many farmers will be sleeping better tonight because of the Minister of Agriculture. And I think he should be happy and proud for that. So I want to compliment the Minister and the Ministry for seeking to do the right thing by the farmers, and that is to ensure that they hear and take the contributions of these hardworking Barbadians into consideration as we draft bills for them, as we remain a government of the people, for the people. Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the other things I observe in listening to the Honourable Minister is the fact that what this chamber and Barbados has to recognize is that this is a process. This is a journey. All the things required will not come in this one bill. The fact that technology will change, the fact that criminals seem to continue to add to their sophistication of operations, that changes, and therefore the legislation must be proactive to ensure that we stay ahead of the times. Now, as I stand, I want to make it clear, and again, I want to say thank you to the Minister of Agriculture. A lot of people may not know that we are in constant communication because I have a passion for agriculture, and he gives me a listening ear. He sees me as an ally in agriculture and not the shadow Minister of Agriculture. Therefore, I can stand here, and not only because I give this my full support being on this side, Mr. Speaker, sir, but truly because it has in the elements that I can be proud of and elements that I do truly and genuinely support. Sometimes when debating legislation, sometimes when in discussion with Barbadians, you're trying to explain the policies, it is easy to be misunderstood. And that is why, as I stand here, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to try to be as clear as possible. I know I always tell myself I'm the second most misunderstood person in Barbados. You know, and being number 30 of 30, that can happen, Mr. Speaker. So that is why when I speak on these matters, I like to be as clear as possible. Now, why do I have the passion to speak on agriculture coming from the urban corridors known as the City of Bridgetown? And there are two main reasons for that, sir. One is that some 30 years ago, like members in here, I was dragged into farming as I had to be part of my grandmother's garden at the tender age of 9 years old to ensure I can buy school clothes to get to school. I had to plant my own lettuce and go around and sell it. At that time, yes, to buy clothes and buy shoes, put it in a bag and wet it, and make sure you got it watered. It looked very presentable, Mr. Speaker, sir. I had those days, probably large part of the generation with that. So I know what it is to be a part of the farm, to get your hands dirty, to enjoy being in the soil after not enjoying it so much, having the shame of riding about on your bicycle, selling letters, and having your friends make a lot of sport out you because you're young and you don't know better. But when you recognize that you can take that money and go into town with your mother and pick out what you want, let them laugh. Because they had on dog muscles, I had on the shoes that I wanted to wear, sir. So the shame was out through the door. So I understand what it is to be part of a farming family. I am the proud nephew of Aunt May's, of the Aunt May's seasoning. I can tell you, sir, about growing chive and picking onions and going to school and people wondering, where is that smell coming from? And quickly putting my hands in my pocket and saying, I wonder where it's coming from too. I had those days, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I know what it is to labor in the vineyard, a quarter acre of land in Freehill, Black Rock, sir, from the tender age of 9. And have members of the community, as the Honourable Member, the Minister in the Ministry of Finance was just saying, to have people to time your produce better than you. I remember having our culinary herbs, sir, reaped on many occasions before we can reap them to make that tasty bottle of seasoning. I can also remember sleeping in the mango tree with the Lane family, waiting to catch the culprit. We did not have drones at that time, but we slept with the black ants, sir. We were the drones. And I can remember the night that the gentleman was caught. And I can remember what happened to him between then and the time that the police came. But I will leave out that part, Mr. Speaker, sir. I will not talk about the hot lashes he got, Mr. Speaker, sir. But I want to make it abundantly clear, in all seriousness, that I give this bill my unreserved support, my 100% support, sir. And it is for the reason I want to make contact with the legislation and make contact with the bill, sir. So that Barbadians listening could understand the importance of this legislation. This legislation is not here for grandstanding. This legislation is not here to tick a box to say that we are trying to answer the quarrels of farmers out there. This legislation is touching to the very issues raised by farmers decade after decade after decade. Now, there is a popular music video made in my constituency by a popular artist, Chief Ding, and Weather 40, not their real name, so I call him Mr. Speaker, with your permission. And they have a saying, I tell them already and I tell them again. Now, when they use that, people may take the damn wrong. So I can change his lyrics with his permission. So I tell you already, and I will tell you again, that this is something that I was saying to Barbadians, that many people wanted to be part of agriculture for a very long time. I remember as a teenager in the 90s, late 90s, going to the Ministry of Youth Affairs, to the Division of Youth Affairs, and saying to them, one of the ways that we can engage bored and unattached young people was by the way of agriculture. I was turned away many times, Mr. Speaker, saying that young people are not interested in agriculture. Young people don't want to get their hands dirty. Young people see agriculture as slavery. They don't want to be involved. And they were saying that to a young person who had a lot of young peers who wanted to be involved in agriculture. So I just couldn't understand the sentiment, and I have lived to the point where all Barbadians can look and see the evidence that agriculture has now been made so sexy in this country. I remember in this same very chamber, Mr. Speaker, sir, when a minister was appointed to the Ministry of Agriculture, and it was seen as such a demotion, a position of nothingness. And now the Honourable Minister, the member for St. Philip South, brought such sexiness to the ministry. It is like a young lady in a bikini or Browns Beach, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is extremely sexy that all members feel the passion to stand today, sir, and have a word. So much so that it was the member for Christchurch East made a penetrating point about fingering, pointing out persons in relation to, sir,
I'm glad for the qualification.
Yes, sir. I must qualify, sir.
Very glad for the qualification.
Penetrating point, sir. That's where he left off. It will continue. But the reality is that in this Protection of Agricultural Produce Bill 2022, as I said before, being introduced to gardening some 30 years ago and owning my own farm for 24 unbroken years, just last month, I have a very serious passion and love for agriculture. I can see what it can do in relation to employment, business, food nutrition, and that is being able to feed yourself the nutritious things that we need, addressing the taste, because a lot of our taste, particularly of our younger generation, is based on television and Hollywood, where certain brands are sold to you from cartoons to action movies. And sometimes your own local dishes are really placed on the back burner. Sometimes you can only get those tasty dishes when you go by certain friends in the north, when they would answer or they would give you that invitation. Other than that, you cannot get these tasty local dishes, because pie and chicken is my favorite dish, and the various songs as they go ish, 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 Mr. Speaker, that is what the young people are being exposed to. So we have to address the concept of taste, concept of acquired taste. But the value of agriculture, sir, and one of the reasons that I carry such a passion for it is because the whole idea too of food sovereignty and food safety. And when I talk about food safety, like the minister, I think about, do we know the chemicals being placed in produce that we import? I am not saying not to import, but what I am saying is that when you plant locally, you can have a greater sense of security knowing what is in what you are eating. And we have a practice in this world that you will see bigger countries with bigger farms have on some of the produce for export only. And sometimes you have to ask the question, why is it for export only? And Mr. Speaker, that too, I leave there for you to ponder. But when I think about agriculture too, I think about the benefits that it has for the environment. So as I go through and you hear about the empowerment, the employment, the business, the nutrition, the safety, the sovereignty, it's really a no-brainer that we see that we have an agricultural government, a government that supports agriculture, a government that does not look down on agriculture, but does all in its power to ensure that we improve the livelihoods of those in the forefront of agriculture, our farmers. Mr. Speaker, sir, I finish on the value of agriculture on the point of empowerment and enfranchisement. And really on behalf of the citizens, the residents of the city of Bridgetown, I want to thank the Honourable Member, the Honourable Agriculture Minister, his ministry and his team, the Cabinet and the Government of Barbados on behalf of my constituents. Why, Mr. Speaker, sir? With Project CARE, with the feed program and all, they have been, and I see the member shaking his head before because he knows that many a name I sent to him from the city of Bridgetown, persons who want to be involved in agriculture. And swiftly his ministry have been able to swoop them up and facilitate them in this very empowering activity. Some of these young people who feel hopeless, disenfranchised, feel left out by the society can now ply a trade and be able to plant something beyond the vegetable matter that they would have been planting before. They're now being able to plant in a very legal and productive and profitable way, Mr. Speaker, sir. So on their behalf, I thank you, Honourable Member. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank the Honourable Member, as the member for Christchurch East said, and I will continue in the vein. He may not be able to pat himself on the back, but I will put the pats there for him. I have seen the energy of the Honourable Member, the interest, the passion, the aggression, the work, for almost a decade as a social commentator, Mr. Speaker, commenting on another place. I had a serious difficulty with how Barbados treated to agriculture, and I said we needed a member, a minister, somebody who would roll up their sleeves and get agriculture growing in Barbados, get the machines going, get the land plowed, get the land planted. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we have that in the Honourable Members for St. Philip South now. And I am proud to stand here and be able to report that to this country. not idle words, sincere words, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the interest that I have seen from my constituency even surprised me, although I know back for over 20 years ago, I've seen the interest in young people, and I am glad that we are in a position now to facilitate them and now to protect them in this bill before our consideration today. Now, to make direct contact with the bill and in going through the brief, I will make it a document of the House if I have to, Mr. Speaker, sir. But in the state of predial larceny in member states, FAO Brief 3, 2013, highlighted to us, sir, that 98% of farmers participating in the survey have reported at some time that they would have suffered loss by way of predial larceny, aka thieving people crops. 98% of farmers report that they would have lost crops at some time. Over the period of time, they would have reported 18% of their crop losses at any given time. That's about 20%, 1/5. Now, when you think about what you have to input, when you think about the work, when you think about sometimes the scrawny markups that you may be able to put on in hard times, and somebody is going to come to you and steal 1/5 of your labor, it is something that we have to take serious. Now, listening to commentary on agriculture and predial larceny for many years, it was said that government after government, law enforcement after law enforcement, did not take the idea of crop theft serious. I remember being in a police station in the countryside, and an old gentleman running in that police station while I was in there, sir, crying, the tears running down his face, saying to the officers, come, 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 they're killing my cow all right now. My $3,000 cow, come, come, come. Mr. Speaker, sir, the police did not move in time. I witnessed that myself, sir. I witnessed on many occasions a different cow. This is C.O. Williams now, losing herds of sheep and going in the paper and crying too, almost with snot coming out the nose, sir, and complaining about how these people who perpetrate these crimes on these hard-working Barbadians will be just given a slap on the wrist. But when you look in this bill, sir, and you see the increase of penalties, that is why I say a lot of farmers should be sleeping a lot better tonight once they follow this debate. Once they follow what we are saying, if they follow what we are doing, they should take ease knowing that the days of the slap on the wrist are over, sir. Mr. Speaker, as I make contact with the bill, one would recognize, if they are familiar with the two previous bills, the Thief Act in 1994 and the Protection of Agricultural Produce and Livestock Act in 2017, they would realize that those two bills were merged together. The consultation of farmers were added in, and great thought went into the creation of the bill we are talking about today, which is the Protection of Agricultural Products Bill 2022. A drastic improvement on those two pieces of legislation. The funny thing about the Livestock Act, as my colleague from St. Michael North pointed out, is that that act did not include the protection of livestock. Livestock wasn't even in the Livestock Act, sir. So I think it was really a no-brainer to make the correction. I see them adding the sugar cane as part. It wasn't part of the previous bill, sir. When I look at the fact that culinary herbs, that as I said, that sent me to school, they were not included in the act, and that has been corrected. Poultry. Now tell me, how are you going to protect farmers and not protect poultry? Mr. Speaker, sir, I really like to emphasize my seriousness and support for a bill like this. And I cry shame of what came before. And that is why when we fail to speak to stakeholders in industries and feel that we have all the knowledge, and we run here and try to make legislation without speaking, This is what happens. And that is why I'm glad this administration is very consultative. They go and they speak to the relevant stakeholders to ensure that you can plug all these gaping holes. More holes than a strainer, sir. They have been plugged here today. Mr. Speaker, don't want time to be long, so I want to go to the meat of the matter for me, and that is where the fines are concerned. And that is when you could see that falsifying documents in the previous bill, there was no mention of it whatsoever. And there was a heavy reliance on the provision of records, receipts, etc., but there was no provision for consequence for falsifying those said records. This bill introduces that, sir. This bill speaks to, apart from it being left out in the 2017 bill, $10,000, 5 years in prison, or both. So don't try to falsify no documents because you're putting yourself in problems. Crime will not pay. The only person that will pay, sir, persons like yourself, lawyers, sir. Outside of that, crime does not pay. And I want the crop thieves to hear me and hear me loud. I tell you already and I will tell you again, keep from around the people crops. This is the Keep from Around People Crops Bill 2022, if I can rename it, sir. That is what it named. So I want the pretty larcenists to hear me and hear me loud. I want to move to the next one, sir. Fail to comply or obstruct police. There's a growing trend in Barbados as we watch social media for people to obstruct the police in their duties. And I try to advise people to do the right thing the right way. Sometimes you may be thinking you're doing the right thing and you do it the wrong way. You end up in more problems than if you was doing the wrong thing. So there is consequences being added on for that. It was $5,000, 3 years in prison or both. It double it up, man. $10,000 or 5 years in prison or both. Because what this is saying to you is that the Minister of Agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Cabinet of Barbados, and the government of Barbados, they are not playing. They are very serious about the protection of people's agricultural products. And the last one is convicting of stealing. And I want us to get this one clear, and I want us to get this one right. Before it was $10,000 or 5 years or both. No, $100,000, 5 years or both. Not playing. Serious business. Serious business. I watch in this country as a farmer. People go in to a supermarket, pick up a slab of lamb, a tot of jam, a leg of ham, and get lost where? In prison. Get time. For $11.47 worth of produce. $11. Lost where? But you're going to kill somebody, $3,000 cow, and get a slap on your wrist and say, don't do it again. Utter rubbish, and it comes to ain't here and no. It done. Do not touch the people's produce. Hear us loud and clear. So farmers can go out there and farm without fear, knowing that consequences will be there. Mr. Speaker, sir, I know many a farmer that farm in this country, and when the dogs come and eat up the thing, the monkeys attack them, the flood get them, and they say, okay, these are natural things, you know? But then the 2-foot monkey comes, sir, and wipe out the ground. And you know what they do? They pull up everything and say, down with that. Don't tell me that, they're farming, they're done farming. So food security is then threatened. But what the minister and the ministry is saying, sir, is that that is over. We are taking this serious. And not by word, not by debate, but by legislation, sir. By legislation in this house today. That says to the culprits, so far and no further. When I look at the other things besides the deterrent of heavy fines and penalties, I see that we are looking at increasing on-farm surveillance, neighborhood watches, public education, and the drones. I want the thieves to know that because of technology, When you look in the sky and you see a light, it is not a plane, it is not a star, it is not a satellite, it is the drone of the Barbados Police Service. That is what it is. Anytime you look up in the sky, you see something flashing, it is a drone, you are on camera, smile and show your best side. Because you're going before the law courts and consequences are coming. Sir, what I am saying is that the ministry has here the ability to deploy drones to watch crops overnight. That is what I am saying to the criminals out there. The drones are watching to make sure that people's produce are being protected. So you can think once, think twice, or go and plant your own things. The Ministry of Agriculture is facilitating people with land. Before, it wasn't so easy. Mr. Speaker, I stand on my feet to share my experience and my experiences. I remember going before the ministry and year after year after year trying to get land for the landless. I was landless, but it wasn't giving me any land. And the farm said about 6 weeks to be back to you and this thing years ago. When the ministry was known for its inertia. The ministry was known for not doing much. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I remember through the intervention of a former Prime Minister, a former Minister of Agriculture, the field for me. And I got sunlight. It took me about 2 years. And I remember going into the ministry so excited with my paperwork. And the woman, you know, she mouth in the air, sir. You feel special. You feel special. This thing's a March 6 weeks, it took me 2 years. She told me, no, you used to take 9 to 12 years. So you feel special because you get in 2. But we've done all of that now, Mr. Speaker, sir. In 6 months, we have documents being processed that people could go and farm. That is why people don't have any excuse now to go and pick up people's produce in the late of night. And that is why I say I commended the minister earlier, not just for talk. The whole idea of chipping, tagging, nanoparticles, putting barcodes on the bright fruit, putting barcodes on the potatoes. We're going the full way, sir. Whatever we have to do to protect this industry, sir, we would, because this industry is not just about farming. It goes way beyond that. It is about empowerment, enfranchisement, business, employment, food nutrition, food security, food sovereignty. When the ships and the planes stop coming, sir, we must be able to feed ourselves. And that is why the protection of produce is so very, very important, that we cannot and will not, and we're demonstrating that we are not playing with the produce of farmers in this country anymore. Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the things that I would like to see now as I get to my suggestion stage of the debate is that we start to turn the narrative about agriculture. A lot of times when you hear about agriculture in the media, it is the dogs killing somebody's sheep. There is some glut somewhere. There is some fallout somewhere. But I want to hear about that guy in Cleverdale that I know that built a 2-story house off of tomatoes. I want to hear about him, and I want young people to hear about him. I want to hear about the lady I know who built multiple 2-story houses across this country through agro-processing of the same culinary herbs. I want to hear those success stories. Because if we continue to only talk about those who have failed and the failures, we will not be encouraging persons to get involved in the industry. So I want these stories to be told, and not just the stories of the devastation of the monkeys and the pretty larceny and all of these things. That's number one, sir. Number two, for years we've heard about the request for Barbadian condiments and the inability to fill the containers to export. Because that's one of the things one of the big ones I miss in my list of benefits to agriculture. The ability to export and earn foreign exchange, and the ability to cut down imports and save foreign exchange. Two big ones that I want to add to my list. But I want to see us moving towards the agro-processing that gives us that ability to export more and to import less. That is what I am talking about. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to see an idea not original to myself, drive-through vending, where we thinking about what to do with vendors on the highway. And I remember this guy sent a proposal to me. So he sent it to Sam Pooch and the Dapi years ago in the past administration. I think I could dust it off and bring it to the honorable member. where you can have drive-through, drive-bys, people can drive through in a sophisticated way and purchase produce. Because one thing a vendor would tell you that he or she needs is traffic. And that is where you will find people endangering themselves and motorists on the highway trying to sell among cars. But if we can plan in such a way and execute that people can drive up in a properly organized and safe way, I think that that is a good recommendation, sir. I would like to see the Scotland District take the pride of place of the breadbasket of Barbados, 1/7 of Barbados with fertile soil. I would like to see us keep continuing moving forward where that can be fully planted. And I would like to see more cooperatives as our people cooperate in their pursuits of agriculture to seek empowerment and enfranchisement of themselves, of their families, of their communities, and of this Republic of Barbados. In closing, sir, I want to make sure that nothing is left unclear and that I would like this House to acknowledge that I and the people of the city of Bridgetown too support this Protection of Agricultural Products Bill 2022. Sir, I am obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Michael East.
The drive-through markets are part of the legislation, last vendors legislation, and it is also in the regulations that Minister Simmons, which was brought to Parliament, which was initiated by Minister, my good friend Dwight Sullivan from St. George. I don't know. I know. Member of Parliament. Yeah. Eddie, you know, you don't get used to these things. The speaker gonna keep me in order. If I call a man named him, I type in already this colonial thing that one thing over there working with him. Sir, with all respect to you, first of all, no, it make you feel like you're a real parliamentarian and know these things good. Sir, but sir, we want to say I compliment and fully support the Minister of Agriculture for his efforts, but I obviously have some concerns. But you know, I am not a strong advocate of any Hamitic theory that black men curse and black men like the thief. Black men like the thief produce. I have a practice. I like the practice of reality. So I know the culture of this agricultural sector. And I know how this agricultural sector, who monopolized the ownership of the lands up to 1838 or so, when the first non-white person owned a plantation in this country. So I have a different understanding. I know the stigmatization of vendors and how people felt about vendors and police officers going into Swan Street in the markets and questioning vendors on where you got those vegetables from. And most of the time when the vendors get a good lawyer, the police could not prove any case in the law courts. I know the background with ordinary black boys unemployed, which the system did not find any work for them. I know of cases where people allow vendors to pick breadfruits, pick akis, and go into town. They had no receipts, obviously. I never heard about that then, about having receipts for selling akis. And they go into town, and when they make the money, they carry back the money to the old lady in the village and give her part of what they've sold. So that's why he said that I like the practice, I apply the practice of our reality, sir. So prior to the 1830s, we were not allowed to sell a potato
especially if we did not have permission from the planter class in this country. We had, especially Barbados, more so than in the other Caribbean, there was no peasant class. We had no peasant class. And many men used to be hungry. So this practice of consuming produce that were not ours really has its roots all back in the 17th century. So when you hear about pedal larceny and all this sophisticated language being used overnight, it was hungry black men, no food. You have to wait on your food for the plantation. And they had to eat. So I was telling my colleagues today while I was at lunch, and as I said before, I hope that I have not gorged myself into any form of stupidity. But I was telling them, as a young man, even when I had things at home, I would venture into somebody's cornfield, something with 10 and 12 people, and clean the entire cornfield. And sometimes you go back home and you also take up, at that time it wasn't any stealing either, you take up a pigtail and somebody goes in somebody's breadfruit tree. And you cut the breadfruit in the center, you put the pigtail in the center. I cleaned a whole cornfield one time, belonged to a gentleman with me named Mr. Mallet, and I confess. And when Mr. Mallet went to my aunt, for me, my aunt said, "You mean he? Come in my house, let me show you. We got all kinds of things here."
But you take it up nonetheless.
But I had the corn.
$100,000, sir.
I had the corn. I certainly at that time, certainly I could not escape because of the size of the crops which we didn't steal anything. As far as we were concerned, that was just a normal way of living. I would have faced the police if on those circumstances. And I went to how much kilograms you got now? But far past any about the kilograms you got inside this legislation, we would have done qualify as being involved in commerce in these circumstances, sir. I believe that while focusing on this legislation, I believe that the minister has done the best that he can do. I am not one of those persons that strongly believe that because you put stiff penalties in place, you would see any fundamental changes. Because as long as poverty exists in a society, especially at this critical point in our economy, when I can't find anything to eat, when a man can't find anything to eat, the easiest place to go is in the ground. You gotta open the doors, you gotta go through the window, you don't gotta go through the roof. And the fella wants something to eat. I don't even know if I should be engaging in seeing this man as being involved in criminal activity. This is a case of survival. This is a case of survival. And we find ourselves in a situation where we have to find a balance that would not cause us to be responsible for the criminalization of more and more black men, so that the prisons that were used to be at 1,000 inmates at a time will move up to 1,500 as a result of any form of legislation we put in place. I am not even sure, sir, that putting codes, you call them codes, on potatoes and yams. I know when a man goes in the ground at that point in time, they got a code. The way he reaps these things, sell them. If you catch a man with these things, I mean, I don't believe I'm giving anybody any new education. When you catch a man with these things that don't have on the code, there's no way you can bring a charge against the man because you have something to identify that the
Honourable is an attorney now? You're an attorney? You're speaking to the law? Evidence?
Sir, pseudo, or partially, but at least I have sense enough as a qualified paralegal to have some little idea of what constitutes a crime. And you can arrest the man if you so desire, sir, but I know that you understand this element of the law very well. As I speak, sir, remember that once I found myself in the law courts for the criminal charge, not for stealing potatoes or breaking anybody's house. But you were there. And you were there because I felt that you were one of the best that ought to be there. Because I felt that I would have been in the prison and all like that. But sir, it is always good. It is always good, especially in modern times, for us to try to see if we can repeal acts, make amendments to acts, and so on, and try to do the best that we can in order to create a genuine, modern, and democratic society. Those people were never interested in anything like that. They control everything. They monopolize everything. Look how we got land. When I think about how we got land, and land is fundamental because as a result of getting land, things like education come along after that. Proper social policies came along after that. And in order for us to try to reduce some of this crime, regardless of whether it's stealing produce from the plantation or whatever, the reality is that we really need the ministers who respond for social policy must understand this, that we have to have expansive, modern social policy and proper personnel to execute the social policy. What will happen in this country at this time, while we're trying to address issues related to agriculture, we have a welfare department that is virtually collapsing. Cause, I don't know. We have other social services that every morning, every day, people come to me and say, look, I haven't been receiving any assistance from this, my light bill, can't get any assistance from matters on the disabled community, you can't get any assistance from matters with the child care board. These social services are collapsing. And what the planter class understood quite well is that even when they were having these experiences, they held control over the vestry. And they did all that they can do through the vestry to make sure that their own type, not ours, because by the end of the emancipation, the apprenticeship period, they went on a program to see how they can protect the poor whites in Barbados. They went on a program for the poor whites, and they felt that many of them were unskillful. They were unemployed. And because they didn't want people of their kind to be in the same position as us, they put these provisions in place. And you know the vestry was not controlled by us. Because I hear these words about we and like people that say sugar made us free and all kind of things. You know, I know that my people's brains were so damaged that when the white plantocracy, the males in the white plantocracy were sick, they used to put their feet on the bodies of black children. And I know they would say, Master, we say. So I know that brain damage is a serious thing. And I still, as we talk and hear sometimes, we must protect this and we must protect that. And we this, and so we what? You only see a little freedom after the 1830s. And even that freedom, you can go anywhere because these people put the Masters and Servants Act on you immediately after the apprentice period. So you still could not leave the plantation to work anywhere. You had to remain there. If you have people in those circumstances, you don't even want to pay. You would not even when after 1838, these people still were refusing to pay people. And that brings us from all that period right down 100 years after into the 1930s, with people trying to get 6 shillings and 3 pence and 6 shillings and 2 pence in the 1930s. So you see all the forms of resistance that occurred in the system. So this is something that is in the planters' DNA. The planters suppress even the grandparents of us who are in this House of Assembly. And now some of them would want the state to take absolute responsibility for protecting their crops and protecting their land. I want to call representatives culprits and all kinds of things if they don't do certain things in Barbados. I don't believe that the police force should go to walk around the plantation. I think after a man go to school and studies hard and put on the police uniforms, he should be walking around plantation trying to protect potatoes and yams. These people stop paying watchmen. If you want security, if a discussion is necessary to ask for powers to be vested, not in watchmen, because they ain't got no watchmen anymore. Some watchmen get elevated to security guards and all kinds of things. But put more power in the hands of the wardens who bear only the arms. You've got a shortage of police officers in this country, sir. And now we're going to take off the police officers and the defense force. A man joined the army and joined the police force, and now he's going to watch plantations. The only reason these things are happening is because, I'm not talking about the government plantations, because the attitude coming from the Ministry of Agriculture is different to the attitude coming from some of the private landowners. I know what I'm talking about because I'm very much involved, and I can talk about that but not know. But that Drax affair, it extends itself in the law, it extends itself in the registry, in England, in Parliament. So these plantation owners that still own land must take the responsibility for protecting the produce on their plantations and don't put the burden back on the state. They say that the state was only responsible for regulating. They developed a universal argument about how far the role of the state should go. I don't know how this application of providing drones, how far that falls, that responsibility falls on the state. They should be providing drones for themselves. Years ago, they provide watchmen for themselves. They had the watchmen living, but they even had shoes. These people would not even give poor women. You know, I see the government had portable amenities, toilets and baths. I don't know how many private estates respect that. They've got to give back something to our people. The government put it in place. We thought that would have been a precedent that would influence them to at least send a signal of the arrival at the point of civilization, that they respect human beings. I drove through the country looking all around, I can't see these things. Some I see in 12 and 15 and 16 and 20 black women got on about 5 or 6 skirts in the middle of campground, and you can't see anything anywhere across that campground that you could call some form of some kind of toilet facilities for women. And it's the most degrading thing, sir, when you drive through the country and you see these grounds long, enough acres of land, these people are not even focusing on this. But then you have a civil government that make adjustment to legislation, trying all that they can to show them that we have an interest in protecting your interests, but they're not even trying to protect the interests themselves. And that is what we're dealing with. Now, I know that the government is trying their best to put a kind of complementary program as it relates to alleviating the problems of the poor. And that's the way I say I am not a victim of the Hamite theory. I don't believe that black people curse. I don't believe it. And I don't believe that black people is just at night get up and go in the campground. I ain't talking about a vicious criminal who going out and dig up about 15 acres. I got about 6 trucks parked outside. Because even the police do that, you know. We got evidence, we got case law in Barbados where policemen went into plantation land and the plantation manager catch the police in the middle of the land carrying the produce. So these are realities. But I'm a little concerned because, look, these men can go to jail if they steal because the penalties do not deter. And if you catch a man stealing a commercial amount, and you say 5,000 or 10,000, if he's stealing potatoes, he got $5,000 or $10,000, unless you think about a specific type of black man in the group. Majority of them men that stealing these things ain't got no money. So you're going to jail. This is incarceration. So we have to sit back and see if the legislation works and give the kind of impact in terms of reducing the levels of criminal activity on the plantation land. I strongly believe, sir, that we made some mistakes before because we should have had land reform in place now. You know how we get land? You know the Rock Hall project up there? You know that it is only when Mr. Elcock died at Mount Wilton and Mr. Elcock left the land for the workers on the plantation, the workers who were enslaved. And you know the family of Elcock still try to fight off the thing. They want the people to get the land, right? We had a fight for land in this country. And all like now, we should have had a very radical land reform program in Barbados. I know the ministry is trying to do something about it, and as the minister indicated before, in the form of the CARE project, which they're having all of the bell land and the land at layers subdivided into 1 acre lots and 2 acre lots. But it's because we did not take steps to have land reform early that this major conflict between labor and the plantocracy still exists. I told you that even in 1838, when these people lay claims to granting us freedom under that apprenticeship, we had massive strikes in Barbados, strikes. Although we were supposed to be emancipated, and these struggles continue and continue. They now reach us here with this new government. And I sometimes it is very difficult to be a minister, especially a minister of agriculture, because you don't want the pages of history etched, or even tarnished with this form of legislation sometimes, because if it does not work right, and a few people remember that we promised these fundamental changes in the society, and the few people who might remember is more so the planter class than the ordinary man that steal the potatoes, the yams, the breadfruits, and the pumpkins and all of that. If it does not work, you're still going to get blamed. You're still going to get blamed. And these people separate the relationship between the workers on their plantation and them. And them. So I hope, sir, that we would be able to put a policy that we would be able to take all these young men. I understand legislation and the restrictions of legislation, and you can't put more, these restrictions can't even be as harsh as you can even sell a potato one time. You don't even know which part you're gonna sleep. You have to stop on the rab land and live. People write you up in a book. You can go to the next plantation for a job. All of these things exist in the system. And this can't be as harsh as that. But I would hope that we can put a number of social programs in place. I would like to see, sir, that we come together and look, as I said, the subdivision of the land, and more small farmers in Barbados can have, if not ownership possession. If not ownership possession. You know the thing about it, lots of men would love to work agricultural land, but they're prepared to work agricultural land for the traditional plantocracy. That is the reality. They ain't going back and work no land for those people. Nobody, you can't expand secondary education, erect a university in the West Indies, bring in other universities, giving people opportunities, and then when you bring them back home and tell them here is a hole, here is a fork, go and work on the plantation that they heard so much horror stories about. So we want small farmers, and the state may have to take the first step, because the people who would like to be small farmers can't buy the land neither. So I strongly believe that just like what the present Minister of Agriculture is doing, we are actually putting land in the possession of persons who are willing to work the land, but certainly don't have any money to purchase the land on their own. So the importance is to possess land. If you lease it, if they lend it to you, if they get a license, whatever, the people need land, a proper land reform program. Obviously, the ministry will understand that it has also to expand because we can't buy tractors. Small people can't buy the tractor. But they can't even buy insecticide, the chemicals, the fertilizers, or anything like that. So the state has to put a number of provisions in place to help the small farmers, especially if I don't even want to call it radically transforming, but if we transforming the state so that Barbadian people, especially that interested in farming, could become a more integral part of the farming sector. Sir, we passed legislation again. We got to understand all these changes occurred. We passed modern legislation in Barbados. And it affects people in the urban communities. The Honourable member for the city just now spoke about how much the city constituency would be pleased with him and others for what. But the problem is that there's not any land inside the densely populated urban community that he represents that will feel that this legislation is very relevant to them. I propose that probably you might have to look at aquaponics or find new ways of growing food around the homes in the cities using plant pots and tires and all these things. If you can encourage something like that in the city. But you can't keep the chickens, although chickens will run all about the city, but you can't keep none in this specific. You can't keep a pig. You can't keep a cow. Nowhere in St. Michael's you can't do these things. And laws related to health. Place restrictions in place where before families in the city and St. Michael's could have community gardens, little domestic gardens that would supplement the demands for food inside these communities. So we have to have a good analysis of what is happening around us, or not this thing will keep perpetuating over and over again. So health has to understand its impact on agriculture. If you bring in legislation, the social faculties, the social policy departments must also look to see exactly how they can also help us to be able to resolve some of the problems that I'm talking about, sir. I believe that legislation is fundamental. And I compliment and support the minister on bringing this new piece of legislation. But in this case, I live with a sense of hope that this effort will have the required impact. But don't let anybody at any time make us feel or make the minister feel that it is the state responsible. The same people who said the state should continue to regulate and nothing more. So the state ain't to own. They want the state is to make laws. These people preach that. It is not Prescott's view. They preach that. From the time we had the emancipation, they preached that. They need to step out. When we were looking to put an educational program in place and the social services in place, they were putting things in place for the poor whites of Barbados and not the black people. Sound harsh, but it's true. So I want all of my brothers and sisters to understand the situation that we are in as a government. It is because of all that is happening around us, not only internally, but also externally, that we now have to be talking food security. The 1960s and 70s and up to just a few years ago, this was not a major issue, but it's a major issue now, where we have to focus our attention on food security. Not only because of man-made policies in Barbados, but environmental changes. We also have to be taking into consideration what is happening in Europe. Where you can, as the Honourable Member for the City said, it is the taste that we acquired. And now, the foods that we would love to have, they cannot be supplied because of the war in Europe, because of the war with Ukraine and Russia. So the government has to put this program in place. It is an urgent matter. We have to put this program in place so that we would not have the issues that we had in the 1930s when we had so much people having to endure starvation. So if we can push the food production up, we can still mitigate the circumstances. We might not be able to get back to the same level when we didn't have the problem, but we can mitigate the circumstances and at least produce the basic requirements for our people that will help us to go through the storm. And when the storm has passed over, it depends. Because if you look and see Cuba, for example, if you look and see Cuba after the embargo in the 1950s, the Cubans had to put a policy and a program in place in Cuba to make sure that they can survive. So the issue of food security.
Your Honourable has 2 more minutes.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So the issue of food security was paramount and a necessity in order for the people to survive and do whatever other things that they have to do. But they survived it. And they were able to produce some great scientists, build up the universities, some great technicians, and the people survived in Cuba in these circumstances. So it is, regardless of what caused that situation, ours might not be an embargo, but the reality is the same thing in the sense that we have to have food, especially having a tourist industry, we have to have food here to supply the consumers of Barbados and the tourists in order to survive. And I would hope that the people of Barbados would understand that many of the things and the challenges that we face are not man-made things in terms of the incompetence of a government or because we do not have a forward-looking policy, but we will keep improving it more and more as we go on. And I'm sure that as we look at modern legislation and we look at things like land reform and we put proper social policies in place, we can still make it through the rough times. Sir, I want to thank you for giving me the chance to speak.
Honourable for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise at this hour to add my voice to this bill, the Protection of Agricultural Products 2022 bill. Mr. Speaker, I first want to thank the member for St. Philip South. And you know, the member for St. Philip South and I share a few things in common. We came to cabinet at the same time. We sat next to each other for a while, and we enjoyed each other's company. You know, and I can speak on his behalf this afternoon because the member for St. Philip South came to work back in that year of 2018 in this very important ministry, and the member for the city spoke about it, and I want to thank him. An excellent speech, member for the city. The others too, they were excellent. But I sat in the chamber and I listened to you, a young parliamentarian, very robust, very aggressive in his, but very sincere. And that will make a very good parliamentarian. But he spoke about how persons, and he used the word, I don't know if he used the word poo-poo, but we use the word poo-poo, frown upon agriculture. And he said when he was in the other place, arguing for and against, putting arguments for and against, he wanted to see a good minister of agriculture, someone who can take agriculture and make it one of the key productive sectors and make it one of the frontiers that we will push and make it one of those sectors that empower and enfranchise working class people. I heard a member for St. Michael East, and he knows how he feels about vending. Those of you know how he feels about vending. As a former Minister of Commerce, I spent a lot of time with the vendors. And I go back in history, he went to 1830, but I went to the 70s. In my discourse some time ago, when working class people, we call it huskering then, they had to hide and run from the slave masters on the plantations to earn a living. But I come forward, member for St. Philip South, and I see today that agriculture is at the forefront. of returning joy to this precious land that we call our home, and is ably led by a good minister, the member for St. Philip South, who comes to work daily and early in his ministry to do justice on behalf of not only the people of St. Philip South, but the entire country. And I want to congratulate you on this bill that you have before the House. And I'm going to get a little parochial here because the member for St. Philip South and I, we talk a lot. Sometimes late at night, up to last night I call him, because we were having a joke. He was consoling me from a little issue that I had yesterday, and I want to thank him. And we speak a lot about agriculture, and I often say to him, boy, if there's one area that I would love to work in, is in that wonderful ministry of agriculture. Why? When I traverse the roads, the highways, and the byways of St. George South, let me tell you, I have 7 plantations. I heard the member for St. Michael East speaking about reparations, but I ain't going there today. We will have our time there. I'm not going there. I have 7 plantations, and I can list them. Those who in St. George South listening, it would be remiss of me to sit here this afternoon and allow this debate to pass, and I don't say a few words on behalf of those good people of St. George, not only South, but the North. But in the South, we have 7 plantations. I can call them nearly 8, because most of my people, if you want to say Edgecombe, is in St. Philip West. Edgecombe employs many persons from St. George South. Actually, about more than 50% of persons working at Edgecombe plantations, not only in the field, but in other areas. So that's the 8th one. I can call them Bottles, Brighton, Boarded Hall, Buckley, Draxall, the Mount, Fairview. And I can go on and on. And if you doubt me, that phrase, the bread basket, that we refer to St. George South as, is truly the bread basket. And I stand here on behalf of the people of St. George South, thanking the minister, the member for St. Philip South, because the Protection of Agricultural Products 2022 bill, it seeks to improve, it improved on 2 previous acts, the Protection of Agricultural Products and Livestock Act and the Pre-Deal Larceny Act. And it expanded the items that are considered agricultural products. I start there because when you looked at the last bill, the 2017 bill, compared to the 2022 bill, the 2017 bill left out sugarcane, member for St. Philip South. It left out culinary herbs. It left out livestock. It left out poultry, planting material, and freshwater fish for human consumption. And I go there because, Mr. Speaker, I grew up in Ellerton, St. George, and I grew up with a grandfather by the name of Stephen Llewellyn Sutherland, who was the district butcher, who was the animal doctor, the co-founder of the Ellerton Gospel Hall, the license blaster, things we have to do now at university, go to Penn State University to get a degree to do license blasting. He had the right to go to the main guard for fuse and caps. He always used to tell you he can destroy you, but he was a man of God, so he wouldn't think about that. But he kept pigs and sheep and goat, and I heard the member for the city spoke about his days of selling lettuce to buy clothes. And we shared something similar, member for the city. My grandfather at night, we engaged in backyard slaughtering then. And we would go to bed on Fridays, primarily on Fridays, Friday evenings, come home from school and rush into the bed at 3:30 because grandfather was slaughtering at midnight. And we wanted to be there to enjoy, because it was a pleasure to see the pigs and the goats and the sheep I know how to slaughter, but I would get charged for it? No, because this enforcement, this piece of legislation would probably put me in jail too. But I know how to slaughter pigs. I know how to use the pawpaw shank to bloat the skin and take the sheepskin off. These are the things that I learned. And I know how much is a pound from how much is a kilogram. So when I send my pig to the farmer's market up in St. Philip to be slaughtered, I know when it returns whether it is my pig or it is the member for Christchurch West pig. Or if it is the member for the city's pig, because I understand weight. I ain't calling anybody anything, but I am just telling you that is where I came from. But I go further. Not only did I spend the night with my grandfather learning how to slaughter, backyard slaughter, and where not to touch and what to do. He didn't use to electrocute the pigs then. He had the technique. He would use his sticky knife and go in, one jerk and you're gone. Pig down. Not much noise, but he's down. And then we take the razor blade and the hot water and we scrape it. And at the end of that, what you got? Good pork. Selling proper pork. What the man at Carrollton, good man at Carrollton, I don't want to call his name, what he calls proper pork, my friend. Now, that's not all, Mr. Speaker. I go further, because that didn't only happen in my backyard, growing up as a little boy at Hamilton Primary and at the large school. But he traveled around the district as a district butcher at night, primarily, taking his grandchildren with him. Dwight Floyd, Alan came after, but he had Floyd and Dwight and Sharon, his granddaughter who lives in Canada, they call her a tomboy. She was with us everywhere we went, helping people. And he did it for free. That was the community spirit that we had. He did it for free. I am reaping the benefits of those days, by the way. I am telling you that, and I make no apology for it in saying that. He was a good man to his community. And livestock farming was prevalent in those days in the St. George South community. And the member for the city spoke about selling lettuce to buy his clothing. But I grew lettuce in the backyard, a quarter acre, to buy cricket clothes and cricket shoes. My brother Floyd and I, who was just about 2 years older than I, he's celebrating his birthday this year, the 27th of August. He'll be 55. And we grew lettuce. I remember for the city, we pushed it in a pancart around selling to raise money to buy cricket gear in those days. And that wasn't only the Sutherland boys that did that. That was a community thing. And we bought from others, and others bought from us. But I wish to praise that community as well, because pre-deal larceny, I can't recall hearing much about theft in that community. While I heard members speaking about theft today, and it is real. But persons would come and knock on your door and say, can I get 2 limes? We had lime trees. Can I get 2 coconuts? Can I get breadfruit? Breadfruit trees still in Allerton there. We don't sell breadfruit, so we give away breadfruit. Can I get 2 carrots in the ground? Can I get a lettuce? We grew up not knowing much about the pre-deal larceny. The only pre-deal larcenists, you call it, that we had in those days were probably the monkeys. And I'm proud to say that today, though, despite the lack of legislation back then, we had a different culture. And I want to take this debate elsewhere. We had a different culture. We had a culture of community spirit, a culture of camaraderie, a culture of respect, a culture of love, a culture of caring and protecting property and respecting people's property. I can only speak for the community that I grew up in. And I have a lot of respect for those persons from all areas of Greens, Melverton. That is the spirit that we had in St. George South. We hardly had theft. Persons walk around and say, let me go from Greens to Allerton to get a breadfruit. We will leave from Ellerton and go to Melverton by no, the Lord rest her in her grave. No worked at the Edgecombe plantation as well. And get 2 yams. Because they would bring them home. They didn't used to steal them. They would give the workers the produce then. And I go back there because, you know, we spoke about the legislation. And I go straight to the whole aspect of the mechanisms to combat pre-deal larceny. And I saw the good member for St. Philip South. He listed a few: prevention, detection. I heard the member for Christchurch, he spoke about the drones. The member spoke about tracking. I heard the member for St. Michael's South, South Central spoke about the whole tracking system. But what we did today is enforcement. The legislative framework has been put in place by the good member. I want to thank you, member. But I want to go further to change a culture and a change of behavior and a change of practice, who we are as a people. And we have a role to play in here. We have a role to play. This government came to office, and in its manifesto, we pledged certain things. We pledged to be, not in those words, to be self-sufficient in the areas of root crop production, member for St. Philip South. These are some of the things that we pledged. The Scotland district, we pledged to do some good crops, the type of crops that can grow with the soil to help protect the soil within the Scotland district. We pledged to reduce our food import bill. When I was in the other place in 2018, Commerce and Small Business, a wonderful thing happened. Member for the city, you often talk about young people. The amount of loans, and I want to thank the Barbados Trust Loan Division for the work that we did back in 2020, 2018, 2019 to get the Trust Loan Division up and running. And in 2020, the majority of loans, seed capital that we give to businesses were in the area of agriculture. We give people hope because we recognize that that sector was a dying head under the last administration. It's a fact. So when persons came, Minister gave his perspective on the Trust Loan Division, and I said one of the areas, and that's the member for St. Philip South, he can tell you we talk daily on the trust loans. And every member in here can speak to persons coming to them seeking loans, and the majority of the loans were in agriculture. And even in the city, in the urban corridors, persons knew how to farm, how to get into the business. And it pleased my heart to hear the member for the city thanking the member for St. Philip South, because a number of young people were empowered, and not so young people were empowered. That after 1 year of that trust loan, I had over 4,000 loans. I can't remember what the value was today because I didn't do the research. I'm standing on my feet speaking from my heart today. And a big lot of research I have to do to speak on agriculture, because I grew up, I'm a produce of agriculture, I'm a product of agriculture. That is who I am. Stephen Llewellyn Sutherland and Justine Sutherland, grandparents, the Lord rest them in their graves, they pass it on to the point now that I can say to you today that my father had, my mom called me last night and tell me Luther Sutherland has 8 young pigs from his pig now. And he is giving those young pigs to his grandchildren. So I feel proud standing here today, speaking on this bill and speaking from my heart. I don't need no big lot of notes. But I want to go a bit further, because having brought this legislation, it will take more to combat pre-deal larceny. I think it was the USAID who wrote this article about Trelawney back in 2013. Where can I find my cows? And I think it was some 32 cows that were stolen from a farm in Trelawney, in Jamaica, 32 cows. And after 3 months, you can research it, it is there, it is a common article. After 3 months, I think when the news caught down in Kingston, that farm that had 22 workers, if you research it, only had 6 workers after those 32 cows were stolen. But the value to the Jamaican economy was over I think it was $32 million lost as a result of pre-deal larceny in that year to the Jamaican economy. Either 32 million or 321 million. I speak on the correction because I don't have my notes here. That's from a little research that I did back then. But this act, Mr. Speaker, if we had left the 2017 Act with these wardens in place to carry out law enforcement, how could a warden enforce this legislation? What's the role of the police? This man from St. Philip South had the wisdom to recognize, to enforce law in this country. Who you need? You need the law enforcers, which is the police. And he removed the burden of the warden. The warden had so much clout in this legislation back in 2017. And I surprised that the former Minister of Agriculture, someone that I know very well and I like, my good friend, would do such. I think he was operating under duress at that time. I don't want to go there. I think so. I think he was operating under duress because sometimes, rushing to an election, operating under duress, rushing legislation in this place, bad legislation. And his good friend, who member for St. Philip South, had to come and do the necessary corrections. I want to thank you. But it takes more than the legislation to combat pre-deal larceny. It takes prevention, detection, tracking. These areas are critical. Not only the enforcement, the legislative framework, which is urgent, and I praise the member and I praise this government because he knows that he can't sit on his chair too often because the Prime Minister had him chipping. Just like she has all of us, because we need to do things and do them in a manner to help our people and to help the country. Time is against us. We can't sit down and talk about we got 15 years put down. We have to do it now. And I thank him again. But prevention, the member for the city, you touch on an area that I want to go to. When I was in the other place, again, back in 2018, I think it was in 2019, that Ministry of Commerce, the cooperative division, I visited most of the farmers in this country, the co-ops in this country. And I recognized one of the areas to drive your costs down was to form cooperatives. And this government is still mandated to ensure that cooperatives in agriculture become the order of the day, whereby those farmers feel, even though they are protected by this legislation, they have that communication and that ecosystem, the agricultural ecosystem that is so critical. Pre-deal larceny thrives on information asymmetries. Or if you want to reverse it, asymmetric information asymmetries. That's what pre-deal larceny thrives on. Where the stakeholder, the farmer, the market, the retailer, they don't have the same information. So the pre-deal larcenists create a black market and a culture and a business that members spoke about. But that speaks to information asymmetries. That's what that speaks to. Whereby there's disjointedness within the farming community and within the agricultural communities. And one of the ways to combat that is through the formation of cooperatives, where it's not the meeting Susu term, but it came out of the Susu turn and the cooperative movement and those movements where you share your costs. And it drives the cost down for those members that are within those cooperatives. And that is some of the ways to associate with this legislation, to empower this legislation. While the members spoke about neighborhood and farming district waters, that will help, but it is entrained and entrenched, and it becomes more relevant through the cooperative movement. Most of these prevention measures. Now, Mr. Speaker, we heard about the drones. Yes, I am one for the drones. I'm one for the tracking, the tags, the electronics, microchips, RFIDs, the drones, ultraviolet or nanoparticles. All of these are tracking and detection systems that can be used to help empower this legislation's member for St. Philip South. But public education and cultural reorientation is fundamental. We have to now begin an education program, or we want to call it a sensitization program, not only on this legislation, but how we can empower our farmers now that we have them, I don't want to say free of theft, because you're going to still find one or two persons, and I'm not going there to suggest that Barbados is full of pre-deal larcenists. I ain't going there. But I know that we have case of losing products and demotivating young farmers as a result of persons losing, it's about 18% of their crop. That's what it is said. It is written about 18%. Right? This is millions of US dollars annually across the Caribbean. And I'm saying now is the time for us to get into the highways and the byways and support those guys in Greens, member for St. Philip South. And I challenge you here as my friend. I have some farmers in Greens and in Drexel who need land. They came to me up the day before at the ministry asking for land. And I promised them land, my friend. I promised them land. I promised them land, them young boys in Greens and in Drexel and some in Melverton and in Ellerton. I promised them land. I promised Blacker land. I call in him. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. And I know my good friend. I'm not saying that to tell you that me and my good friend, we have any disagreement, because the member for St. Philip South will make sure that I get some land. And I too have to make sure I get some land myself. And he laughs. But Mr. Speaker, this piece of legislation that we so happily debate today recognize the major threat that pre-deal larceny is to the agricultural production and food security. And you know that every percent that we increase and we lose as a result of pre-deal larceny in this country, what we have to do, we have to import, whether it's poultry, whether it is food crops, we have to import. So what that does, take away our foreign exchange. And I put it in simple terms. I'm no economist. We have to take up money to send overseas to buy products, poultry, chicken, whatever, pork, root crops, broccoli, and I heard the member here, pineapple, looking to grow these things now regionally and locally. So we have to support this legislation in the highways and the byways of this country. I am calling on all sectors, not only the agricultural sector, the business sector, the retail sector, the small farmers, those persons within communities and youth groups, the cooperatives, to get out there and form more cooperatives. Now is the time. We can't sit on our laurels and on our desks. We have to go on the highways and the byways and take the business to the people. Because this is about empowering the ordinary man. Those persons, and I see the member of the city, I enjoy your speech, man, but that's why I keep referencing you. I see people in their backyards. People in their backyards farming. But they're farming to sustain and send school their children and themselves. And I heard the member spoke about gone are the days when we only going to tinker with agriculture. But we need to see some breakthrough and some innovation of agricultural produce, utilizing our good soil and our lands, whether it's reparations lands or not, to create some innovation so we can begin to export and generate the necessary foreign exchange out of agriculture. And I see the black belly sheep now going regionally. I want to thank you. If I could hug you and kiss you, I would member for St. Philip South. But I can't. That won't be manly, and we know how we are. But I embrace him, and I thank him for the journey and the steps you've taken so far to ensure that agriculture return to the glory days where persons are now seeing the benefits of getting into agriculture. So when we speak about housing, I didn't want to mention any housing today, but when we speak about housing, the member from Christchurch West is smiling because he knows I eat, sleep, and breathe housing. Just like you, member for St. Philip South, you eat, sleep, and breathe agriculture. I woke up last night, jump up out of bed, and from a dream with a hammer and a nail, erecting a Joravilla house. So you understand. No, I had a hammer and a nail, and I was pounding, erecting a Joravilla home. I can't recall which part of Barbados it was, but I don't think it was in St. George South. I think it was in St. Lucie. It was in St. Lucie. But, Mr. Speaker, why I went there, because we are now seeing a model, and I've spoken to the member for St. Philip South and my senior minister, member for Christchurch West, where when we build houses, we are now going to put it on sufficient land where persons can do backyard farming. What a beautiful idea. What a beautiful idea. So that we not only enfranchise you and empower you by giving you a home, but you have the opportunity now to grow some produce with this piece of legislation that has been put to you, enforced and will be reinforced and utilized in a way to empower people. You can sustain your livelihood and probably help pay your mortgage from it. That's the model we have to go to. So I stand here, Mr. Speaker, as a product of agriculture, saying to you that predatory larceny robs legitimate producers, and it also stifles the incentives for farming entrepreneurs and adversely affect poor working class people. It does. Because when you go in Ellerton, I didn't see that in my time, so let me backtrack. When I go in the city, and Corey Lane cousin doing some farming, and a man going there in the backyard, Corey Lane gone to Popular and tell Popular within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I have some cucumbers for you, I have some beans for you, I have some pumpkins for you. And Popular writes up and says, all right, I will receive these from you in 2 to 3 weeks. And you go now and you credit something for your children, but when you go back to the backyard, you see no pumpkin, no cucumbers, no beans. How are you going to, you see the soil again that you got to turn around and tell. How are you going to sustain your livelihood as a poor man? That's why he's saying it adversely affects the poor. Because these are working class people who are not
even paying taxes, but they're trying to sustain a life, to build a business so that they can get into the formal sector, into the formal business sector, because they're informal. When they're growing in their backyards and they're growing and growing, they go for the seed capital from the trust loan division. What a wonderful government, man. We should be tapping our government for this, you know. It's a wonderful government. You start growing and then you go to the trust loan for your $5,000. And thereafter you get a piece of land through the member for St. Philip South. You know, some either at Bass, St. John, some of these 200 acres that we have to give. I don't want to speak to it as your baby, but I have to mention it. These are some of the things that we ought to be proud of. So, Mr. Speaker, we have given the average man the motivation now to till the soil. And with this legislation, my point to you is that we seek to change the culture and reinforce the behaviors that will allow Barbados to continue to benefit from this piece of legislation through prevention, through tracking, through communication, through all the necessary systems that make up the agricultural ecosystem that will allow this sector to become one of the most productive sectors and generate the necessary revenues that we need to see our small businesses maintain the buoyancy in our local economy that is necessary. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable member for St. James South.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy to have the opportunity to join my colleagues in addressing this particular bill on predial larceny. It is one that has been needed for a significant time to be able to enable us to make agriculture truly work. It is such a serious problem, and it is felt right across the region. What we are experiencing across CARICOM is that predial larceny is having an impact to the level of 321 million US dollars per annum. That's over $600 million, sir. What it means is that predial larceny is eating out the agricultural product across this region. And why is this important? Because of the issue that was raised by others today of the need for our food security in this region. And at a time such as this, when we have logistics problems, when we have the war in Ukraine, but we also have at the moment, Mr. Speaker, floods, droughts, and all of this is going to compromise our capacity to be able to get food and to get food affordably. That is why the work across the region to try to push food security and food production is extremely important. We have a target that the CPSO is to work across the region. This is the CARICOM private sector organization, that by 2025, that we will be able to increase our production by at least 25%. And what does predial larceny mean to all of us here in the region? Jamaica, for example, loses something like 55 million US per year. Little St. Vincent loses 1.2 million per year. Trinidad, close to 11 million per year. And what it is undermining is the capacity of the region to be able to feed its people. So the risk here is not only for the farmer, but it's for people who live in the suburbs, people who live in the urban corridor. All of us are in this together. All of us have a vested interest in making sure that predial larceny is stamped out. And that is why it is absolutely critical that everybody within that chain does what he or she must do to be able to protect agricultural production in this country and across the region. Now, sir, it reminds me of that song years ago that I used to hear as a child. oh Lord, the bucket got a hole in the center. And if you think a tell a lie, you know, that song represents, I think, the best example of what radial larceny is to agricultural production. It is a hole in the center of that bucket. And that is why I want to congratulate the honorable member for bringing this bill and for putting before this chamber all of the sections that seek to address the challenges that we will have in seeking to ensure that radial larceny is reduced, minimized, and may God help him that we could eventually stamp it out. Now, sir, one of the things that the FAO had shared about this issue of radial larceny as it impacts right across the region, they said that there's a domino effect in relation to radial larceny. It's not only the primary producer, the farmer who's worked hard, the family is depending on him to be able to put food on the table and take care of their needs. It is also that as people come out from agriculture, you reduce the acreage that is now put into agricultural production. You reduce the number of people who are attracted to invest. So even if a farmer stepped out and said, look, I am done with this, I am just not getting anywhere with this, maybe somebody else could do it, I want to put my land up for sale. The chances of him getting someone else who would want to invest in agriculture are going to be very limited because people will shy away from going into such a risky area, knowing that the chances are radial larceny will do them out. And what does that mean? It means then the agricultural land will then shift to other uses. And once it goes out of agricultural production, it's going to be very difficult to bring it back in. If it shifts into housing, you can't get it back. If you shift it into commercial, you can't get it back. And therefore, it puts at serious risk the security for every citizen in this country. That is why we must all band together in order to address this area of radial larceny. And I want to congratulate the minister again and my colleagues for the arguments that they've put on the table to explain why this is important and how transformative this particular piece of legislation is. Now, sir, part of the studies in seeking to address the issue of radial larceny across the region, a number of countries reported their experiences. And within the OECS, for example, one island, the farmers there spoke about their woes as they were looking at what they needed to do, and they were assessing how successful some of the initiatives were. And the farmers indicated that, in truth and in fact, it wasn't always a stranger who was stealing. Sometimes it was another farmer who maybe had a contract, had fallen short, was afraid of losing his contract, and didn't mind stealing from a fellow farmer. They also reported that in some cases, the persons who were supposed to be there to protect the crop, the very police who were part of the body that was to respond to radial larceny, that sometimes they too were involved in the theft of crops. And what this said to me, sir, is that if we're going to be combating radial larceny, one of the things that we need to address is the underlying crumbling foundations of the values and morals of our society. With the best will in the world, Mr. Speaker, there isn't enough barbed wire, there are not enough things that we could put up unless we spend time working on helping our people to get back to the old-time values. I believe the Honourable Member for St. George South talked about his own experiences with agriculture and that there was no radial larceny because people's underlying value system made a difference to how they related to the property of others. And that what we need is a serious restoration of the values that are necessary in order for us to be able to live a secure and quiet life in which we're all able to provide for ourselves. So this is going to be important. But I want to commend the Honourable Member for the initiatives that he shared concerning what will be done under the legislation to be able to help in stamping out the predial larceny. And one of the things that I had noted in Jamaica is that they had a dedicated predial larceny unit. And so I want to commend the minister for the establishment of a rapid response unit that I'm hoping that once that is formed and operational, that will go some way into assisting us in reducing the scourge of predial larceny. But I want to make a further recommendation. Another part of the initiatives that the Honourable Member for St. Philip South had shared was the fact that they're going to be able to use drones. They're going to look at things like, some farmers may look at things like fencing and being able to do things to help secure their crops. One of the things that is suggested and that is very important is that partnerships are important in dealing with predial larceny. And in terms of partnerships, one of the things is that farmers have to band together and work together in order to help themselves in relation to this scourge of predial larceny. And I want to recommend that the formation of the watch groups is an excellent one, but I would like to take it a step further. One of the things that we want to partner with the Ministry of Agriculture on in the Ministry of Energy and Business is in the area of the formation of cooperatives. Cooperatives are ways for people to work together to be able to achieve more than they can achieve on their own. And being able to build a culture of cooperation is going to be very important. And I just want to let the chamber know that the ministry is eager to actually accelerate the movement of our because we recognize that sometimes there's a reticence in working together. And if we're going to overcome our reluctance to do things together, it is necessary that we deliberately do things in the community to help build and explain and nurture that spirit of cooperation. Because through agricultural cooperatives, there are a number of things that a farming group can achieve. One, farmers can make higher profits because they can do things together, they can go after bigger contracts, and this is going to help us to do the exporting that we want to be able to achieve in Barbados in order to be able to grow our foreign exchange. You want to be able to improve the quality of products. Now, to be able to do that, people have to be able to afford inputs. They can only afford those inputs if they can band together and by bulk purchasing, be able to drop the unit price. And this will allow them to build a better quality product. This will lower their expenses and therefore make farming more viable for those who have engaged in it. They can tap into larger markets. And one of the most important things that we will see is the transformation of the rural corridor, where you will see rural development, where you will see those farms, those prosperous families being able to extract a meaningful living, a living of dignity, doing agriculture, being able to get involved in some of the new technologies that the Ministry of Agriculture has been rolling out to help bring agriculture in Barbados into the 21st century. So being able to work in cooperatives is going to allow and empower our farmers to be able to overcome certain limitations. And when it comes to the issue of being able to buy drones, being able to use the technology, purchase the security services, when it comes to being able to maybe fence their property, that can only happen for a lot of our small farmers if they work in cooperatives and are able to negotiate lower prices, and they're able then to negotiate what is needed to help them to protect their produce. Because with the best will in the world, we will have in the foreseeable future a problem with the capacity of police to be able to be present. Police, more often than not, will come after the fact. But in terms of prevention, the best way to do that is for the farmers to group together And these will be some of the areas that the Ministry of Energy and Business would want to cooperate and collaborate with the Ministry of Agriculture on, to look at the formation of the cooperatives to assist the farmers to be able to get some of the security technology which they will need, and that will enable them to be able to share resources so that we can ensure and make sure that farming is viable in Barbados. Because if we do not plug that hole in the bucket, we will compromise our food security, we will compromise our capacity to earn foreign exchange, we will compromise the capacity of families to provide for themselves. So I want to say to Barbadian farmers, I want to say to Barbados and the Ministry of Agriculture that I personally will work collaboratively to enable and empower us to identify ways in which we can make radial larceny a thing of the past, and that we can create for farmers a much more sustainable future where new farmers will want to come in because they're able to recognize that there are those who are participating, who actually are benefiting, and it will encourage the growth of our farming community. I believe that this is important. I think it's important for the survival of our country and to bring dignity to our farmers in Barbados. Let me again congratulate the Minister of Agriculture, and I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to share and to offer our support in helping to deal with the scourge of radial larceny in Barbados. I'm obliged to.
Honourable Member St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I only wish to make a brief intervention on this bill. You know, one of the hardest things I think that we've ever had to draft as legislation has been this Protection of Agricultural Products Act. Everybody is calling it Pre-deal Larceny Bill, but it's actually the Protection of Agricultural Products Act. Mr. Speaker, pre-deal larceny is not a new feature in our landscape. In fact, my research shows that as far back as 1901, the Secretary of State for the Colonies had directed that an attorney be sent out to the Caribbean islands to investigate the prevalence and impact of pre-deal larceny in our small colonial states. 1901, sir. For some strange reason, the administrations in the Caribbean countries did not support the idea, and the Secretary of State for the Colonies axed that particular initiative. But if in 1901, Mr. Speaker, pre-deal larceny was seen as being an issue in the region, one can imagine how it is seen today. Of course, having heard the earlier presentation from the member for St. Michael East, we understand that he views the matter of pre-deal larceny in 1901 as a particular sociological construct. But however we see the history, however we see the interplay between the plantocracy and those who worked on the plantocracy, what we have had to do, Mr. Speaker, is to craft a piece of legislation that suits the nature of the difficulty that we have today, while at the same time not criminalizing individuals who are engaged in legitimate farming as a smallholder. I'm delighted to know that just about everybody in this chamber, and I'm not surprised, but I'm delighted for the affirmation, that just about everybody in this chamber has had some kind of connection with agriculture. It is unfortunate that too many people of a newer generation don't. But in almost each instance, as members have shared their own experiences with farming, it is obvious, sir, that none of my colleagues, none of the members of this Honourable Chamber were large farmers or had a connection to large farms. From listening to their comments, almost invariably, there were individuals who were engaged in smallholding farming. And as I worked with my office, Chief Parliamentary Council, and the Ministry of Agriculture, making sure that the individual who plants a few heads of lettuce and finds a market for it, or somebody who grows some thyme or some seasoning and wants to be able to sell it to the neighborhood mini mart. We wanted to make sure, sir, that those individuals were not driven out of farming through an overly restrictive legislative framework. And you will notice, Mr. Speaker, that in this bill there is a schedule, the first schedule to the bill, talks about commercial value and commercial quantities. And let me say to the Minister of Agriculture that I've already received a few text messages and questions about how we arrived at what is a commercial quantity. Now that, Mr. Speaker, was not my remit. That was the remit of the officers of the Ministry of Agriculture. But to be fair, some kind commentator pointed out to me that we have honey and sugar cane, with the commercial quantity being an amount in excess of 5 kilograms. 5 kilograms. And they pointed out to me that while 5 kilograms of honey is a lot of honey, 5 kilograms of cane may really just be two, I don't want to call cane stalks. May just be two sizable pieces of cane. And that is not outside of a lot of individuals. I know individuals who have a hole of cane growing in the yard, often for the nostalgia of it. I tried to grow some, sir, but the monkeys got hold of those too. They eat everything. But I want to say that this legislation has been crafted in a way which allows the minister to vary the schedule by way of an order, so that should circumstances require the Ministry of Agriculture to reconsider either upwards or downwards the amount of agricultural produce that they will consider to be a commercial quantity, they have that flexibility. This particular schedule only lists a few broad headings, Mr. Speaker. But it is possible that there may be some agricultural product that has not been included within this, and that flexibility that we've imbued in the statute will allow the minister to make these changes. Now, let's be frank. Let's be candid. When we talk about crop security and food security, we also have to consider how to secure our agricultural produce. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that for those people who do not think that the police have put a lot of resources into helping to deal with the issue of pre-deal larceny, they're sorely mistaken. The police have been playing an extensive role in trying to fight pre-deal larceny. But, Mr. Speaker, we have to recognize that for as long as there is somebody who is willing to purchase agricultural products at what he or she may consider to be a good price without regard for the provenance of that agricultural product, we're going to have a serious problem. People who are involved in purchasing agricultural produce, whether it's a supermarket, a mini mart, a small shop, there's a serious obligation on each of you not to bury your head in the sand, but to ask, where did this come from? If somebody turned up, Mr. Speaker, at a hardware store and said, I want to sell you 100 bags of cement. I want to sell you 4 dozen pancards. I want to sell you 100 hammers. I guarantee you, Mr. Speaker, that the owner of that hardware store is going to ask the first question, where you get this from? Where you get this from? Mr. Speaker, somebody came to your law office and told you that they wanted to sell you an encyclopedia of laws, an encyclopedia of forms and precedents, and the price good. You're not going to take it. You can say, Chief, I don't know you, where you get this from. But there seems to be, it would be wrong for me to say a pervasiveness, so I don't think that would be correct. But there seems to be a feeling that then, however, it comes to eddos and yams and breadfruits and chives and sweet peppers, there seems to be a feeling that the person who wants to buy these things is under no obligation to ask where the body got that from. Mr. Speaker, we should not have to pass a law for that. The same norms that we apply, if somebody show up at the member for St. Michael's South residence and offer to sell him a flat screen TV, what will he say? But yet still somebody can show up with sheep, pigs, pork, lamb, lettuce, and offer it for sale. And you know, it be snapped up without anybody asking about the provenance. That speaks, Mr. Speaker, to a dishonesty that I think we have to confront, and we have to say to those individuals that if you get caught, you too will feel the hammer and the pressure of the law. Mr. Speaker, we have had numerous instances where farmers, both big and small, have been raising the issue of pre-deal larceny. We need a law, we need a law, we need a law. All I will say is this, Mr. Speaker. We now have the law, or when this parliamentary process is finished, we will have the law. But I want to urge those people who are involved in agriculture to understand that securing your product is as much an input into your farming enterprise as buying fertilizer, as investing in acreage, as investing in tilling, as investing in any part of the product. In other words, Mr. Speaker, it is not going to be enough for a farmer to sit back and say, the government, we need a law, we need this and we need that. There's an obligation on every businessman, whether you are a musician trying to protect your intellectual property, whether you are a supplier protecting what you supply, or whether you are a farmer protecting your produce. You have an obligation as well to meet us halfway and to work with us in helping to protect your produce. I know that there are many farmers who have sleepless nights because as the crop is ready for reaping, they're forced to patrol their own fields, stay awake at night just to keep the hands of the thief off of their product. Those people need a national award. But the fact is, the only award you will get is the recognition that that too is part of doing your business. Mr. Speaker, the Barbados Police Service has had a tremendous amount of success going into the end of last year and into the early part of this year in helping to confront and battle pre-deal larceny. A large number of arrests, some individuals were sentenced. We've had a special operation dealing with police and so on. Police, BDF, we've mobilized special vehicles and equipment, including drones. They've done some mapping. They've looked at a whole variety of factors. I'm not at liberty to disclose them. But they have been able to reap some significant success in especially the area of sweet potato thefts. Some people were, and Mr. Speaker, you know what a rod of potatoes is. I know. You know what it is for a farmer to lose 74 rods of potatoes? 70 disc rods of potatoes? Mr. Speaker, as a little boy, growing up in St. George, my father would go and buy a rod of potatoes. And the manager would come and he would measure out the rod. And you know what happened from there. Them is yours. But Mr. Speaker, you gotta dig them. You gotta dig every inch of that rod in order to harvest your potatoes. And my father would do the digging because he was a big shopping man. He was just a little boy, so my brother and I, as he dig, we would clear and research for potatoes. Mr. Speaker, it is not a 2-minute exercise. For you to dig the equivalent of 74 rods of potatoes, you had to start and work for hours and hours and hours. But that speaks, Mr. Speaker, to the tenacity of the thief. This is not like a break-in where you slip in quick, grab some things and run back out. Though that is a person who is intent on depriving the hard-working farmer of his goods. But the police have been able, through intelligence operations, through skillful policing, to obtain the prosecution and sentencing to some of those individuals. In 2 instances, the individuals were sentenced to 6 months in prison. Now, I hope that the level of fines that we've included here are sufficient to be a deterrent to the farmer, to the thief. I hope so. But if it isn't, Mr. Speaker, we will come back to Parliament if we need to, and we will increase the level of fines where necessary. I believe that these numbers, the level of fines proposed and so on, will be a sufficient deterrent, but we are taking this seriously and we are prepared, Mr. Speaker, to come back if necessary. I support this effort. It has not been easy. The minister can tell you we went through several iterations trying to get it right. We were fundamentally opposed to how the last administration dealt with some aspects of pre-deal larceny. And we raised those issues when we were in the opposition benches. But, as was the case with everything that we said to them, they ignored us. They ignored us. They went ahead, they enacted the legislation. It was proclaimed, I think, in December of 2017. But nothing done on it, thankfully, wasn't proclaimed. Thankfully, we are here today to bring to the farming community, to the hard-working farming community of Barbados, a bill that we believe, if people work together, we will be able to wrestle significantly the issue of pre-deal larceny to the ground. But, Mr. Speaker, we are a society that says we need a law. Everything that's going wrong, man, we should pass another law, we should have a law about this and we should have a law about that. Pre-deal larceny is theft. And to carry some of my colleagues into the early jurisprudential thinking, at common law, the position was that whatever is attached to the land is part of the land and not capable of being stolen. Because the perception was that if it is part of the land, it is hard to carry away. A bit naive, a bit naive. But that was so technically speaking, you could not have been charged for theft at common law of growing produce. If you took somebody's produce, it was a trespass to property, which was a civil offense and not a criminal offense. These are things that I suppose the lawyers among us might have an interest in. But that was the case. If you stole agricultural produce, stuff that was grown as opposed to pigs and sheep and so on, you couldn't be prosecuted at common law. You could be sued for trespass to property. But we've gone long past that, and we accept that today stealing of agricultural produce is not just a civil wrong, but it is a criminal wrong of tremendous importance. It robs the farmer of his livelihood. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that sometimes when you carry away 74 rods of potatoes from that farmer, that might be the entire profit. That might be the entire profit that farmer might have made for that field. We need to see that we are all partners in this together. We need to ensure that our small farmers, however, the people who do a little backyard something, are not going to be inconvenienced by our efforts to remove predial larceny as a main impediment to farming in Barbados. We don't want to criminalize our small farmers. We don't. We want to encourage people. In fact, one of the things that the Minister of Agriculture is passionate about is that every Barbadian should be growing something. And if you're carrying 200 bananas for your deer aunt or something, nobody should be stopping you on the road and asking where you get them from. We want to encourage that kind of subsistence agriculture. That too will help to cut down our food import bill. But for those individuals who have invested their lives, their every penny into farming, we have to protect them. But as we protect them, the farmers must agree to take on board that solemn responsibility. Protecting your crop is as much an input into your agriculture as the fertilizer, the water, and everything else that you use. There's that American saying, if you have skin in the game, you stay in the game. So farmers have skin in the game. The government, by putting this legislation in place, by providing to the police service those things that they need, we feel that we are matching the efforts of the farmer. But then that third component has to be the vigilance of the individual who is going to be buying the farm produce. Please, demand to know where it is from. Do not just accept that a person shows up and offers you a good price on beef or chickens and feel that you can just take it without following the law, because if you do, you are going to be as guilty of a criminal offense as the person who stole the product. I am proud of this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. I believe it is a far cry from what we had before. It is sensitive. It accepts the reality that we have to deal with farming not as a single kind of enterprise, but as something both big and small to be engaged in by professionals, to be engaged in as well by hobbyists. But we reserve the right to change the schedule, to change the amount of commercial quantities. And just so I don't recollect if the minister did it, but commercial quantities, if you're found with more in relation to roots, tubers, and bulbs, so that's sweet potatoes, edders, yams, and so on. If you have more than 25 kilograms, that's a commercial quantity, and therefore the law kicks in. In relation to poultry, livestock, fish products, if you have more than 20 kilograms, commercial quantity. Vegetables and fruits, if you have more than 15 kilograms, commercial quantity. I already mentioned honey and sugar cane. Culinary herbs, thyme, parsley, those things are light, so a kilogram is really a fairly big bag. 2 kilograms. Fresh milk, 20 liters. Eggs, 180 eggs. One live livestock, or in other words, one animal. In relation to poultry, 10 birds. Now, when the feedback comes back to us, those figures are too low, the Minister of Agriculture is going to be open to changing it. We've already had this discussion. But we did not feel it was appropriate to go in at a level that is too high and then have too many people sliding under the bar and getting away with it. But the minister has assured me that he is willing to listen to any representations from credible individuals who come with sensible arguments and say, Minister, this cannot work because when I do my little small thing, I got one sheep. So what you can do, okay? He's open to that, and that's a discussion. They've done the research, they've done the analysis, and they think that these numbers are workable, but they are open to coming back if necessary. As any good parliament, as any good legislature must be willing to do. We will adjust if it is required. Mr. Speaker, I support this legislation. I thank the people in the Ministry of Agriculture for their hard work. It was tough going to get this far. Tough going to get this far, because the people who were drafting it are not necessarily farmers. But I think, Mr. Speaker, that we have a bill that will work for us and that will serve the farming community well and for a long time. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'll be very brief, but I felt it extremely important that I led my voice to a piece of legislation that would most definitely impact in a positive way residents of a constituency that I represent that can very well, at some point, be listed amongst those areas in Barbados that one would refer to as the breadbasket of Barbados in terms of food production. We're not there yet, but from what I've been seeing of late, I believe that we will soon get there. Mr. Speaker, when I was in another place, I would often encourage entrepreneurship. I taught business studies. I encourage young men, young ladies in my classes to engage in entrepreneurship, starting of their own businesses. And over the years, I've met some of my past students, former students, and they will come up to me and tell me, sir, we're into farming. We're into farming. Farming, in essence, is a business. Just like a lawyer, a doctor is a small business in some cases, a farmer is a small businessman. And farming is livelihood. But for some reason, Mr. Speaker, I believe over the years, many a farmer would tell you that the theft or agricultural crimes have not been treated with the seriousness that they deserve, despite the fact that perhaps agricultural crimes or predial larceny is perhaps one of the most prevalent forms of crime, of theft, not only in Barbados, but right across the region. In fact, they say that there are more cases of predial larceny than there are sometimes of house breaking. And that's a fact. Right across the region, you have these cases where persons would sometimes, even if you look at how it's treated within the community, persons walk around, they go into your little kitchen garden, they steal your pumpkin, they go into your mango tree, they steal mangoes, and they sell it. And sometimes those persons are not even seen as thieves within the community. They're not treated as criminals within the community. In fact, I remember coming home from overseas one day and seeing a young man in my tree with a box of mangoes, a box. He picked almost every single mango off the tree. And I went outside to ask a question, and his response to me was that, oh, I didn't know that you were back. It was like, no, you're in my yard, you're stealing my crop, my fruits. But in his mind, he's just, it was not even, he does not even see it as a crime. And there are persons who would support that. There were persons who would more take offense to the fact that someone called the police on a young man who was in the tree stealing fruit or breaking a cane or stealing corn or anything like that, than the fact that the young person is actually depriving someone of their livelihood. And the fact that persons openly, in some cases, steal from these farmers, Mr. Speaker, is the greatest disincentive to farming. That form of entrepreneurship where persons go into to growing food, that is the greatest disincentive. They have issues of sometimes access to water, sometimes the land is not as fertile as it should be, and they can work around that. They find ways around that. But when you invest your time, your energy, your money into planting something, and then at that point, when it's time to reap, someone walks into your property at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, based on what I've been hearing here today. Sometimes they have to come as maybe at midnight and work from midnight to 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning and steal all of your products, steal all your entire harvest. It's heartbreaking, Mr. Speaker. Heartbreaking. I over the last 2 years, I've become somewhat of a small farmer. My wife, she refers to herself as a plant mama. People get connected to their plants, maybe not in the same way as you would get connected to ornamental plants, but I'm sure that when a farmer plants something from a seed and watch it grow, there's a connection. And when that is stolen from you, it's almost like you lose a part of your family. It's like, that's how I sense. Because sometimes it brings tears to people's eyes when they're not only thinking about the money that they lost now, but the hard work and the energy that they put into planting these crops that I think brings the tears. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes when persons walk onto your property and they steal your produce, sometimes they don't stop there. Sometimes they steal your tools, they steal your equipment. If you have a few ceilings, sometimes they take that. Sometimes they they clean you out, wipe you out, they finish you. These are some of the realities that farmers face in this country over the years. They're spiteful like that. They're wicked like that. They finish you, leave you in a position where you can hardly restart. And that's the reality. But yet, because of the nature of the crime, only less than half of persons who experience this form of theft report it. And why don't they report it? Why less than half? Why only about 41% of persons who are hit in this way report it? Because in the past, there was never any really serious response, in some cases, from the authorities. And they realized that. And some said it made no sense reporting because they were not taken seriously. So I'm glad today, Mr. Speaker, that I can support a bill that has upped the ante in terms of the seriousness that government has taken as a response to agricultural theft of perennial larceny, where the fines or the fees that persons will incur or will be asked to pay have increased significantly, as well as the time spent in jail from 10,000 to 100,000 in some cases, and from 3 years to 5 years. And in some cases, I believe that it could go higher than that, because from what I'm hearing, that a person could be robbed of up to $100,000, $200,000 in produce. Then I believe that 5 years is probably perhaps too lenient. Because sometimes when we think about it, we think about a few plant pumpkins, a few potatoes being stolen. But then you hear that they come in trucks. There are people out there whose entire livelihood is based on stealing other people's produce, on robbing other people of their hard work. And I believe that a person like that, who is a career criminal, who makes a living, and a good living, from what I'm hearing, a good living, from stealing people's produce, I think in some cases we may have at some point in time to look at even increasing the penalty for such persons, because it has a deleterious effect on a country's food security. And sometimes we don't see things. Sometimes when you see things, you can see the beginning, maybe able to see the middle, and it'd be difficult for some persons to see the end. But if you look in history, you can see the effect of theft on society. I remember I was a historian. I would study history, and during the raids and in that colonial period, Europeans were going, encourage various tribes or ethnic groups, however you choose to name them, to go and raid other communities. And one of the things that people never really talk about is that they didn't only take captives, but they also raid the villages of their food stock. They raid villages of their food stock. So many persons starve. Apart from being captured and spirited across the Caribbean Sea to be used as plantation slaves, a number of persons starved because there was no food. Unless you were from a hunter-gatherer society, you were into agriculture. And when persons raided, they took what they want, but they also took your food. So that agricultural theft existed even then. And it resulted in the destruction and the downfall of many of those societies. Because unless you can sit down and you know that food takes a period of time to grow, and you have the peace of mind that you can wait for that to grow that particular food item, plant it and allow it to grow for the six-week or 12-week period, then you're not gonna start. And if you're not gonna start, then you're gonna have a shortage of food at some point in time. And that happened. It's not talked about, but it happened. And if we're not careful, maybe not to the same extent, but we can have a situation where persons may not be interested in growing food at all. Because it makes no sense to grow food. And we find ourselves again with a high export bill. Something that we've been struggling against for a long time. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, this bill attempts to address that particular issue that none of us want to see. And I will hope that as we go forward, we see, because we're seeing evidence of it, maybe encouraged because of the COVID period that we have been through, but we've seen more and more persons going into agriculture. And the fact is we're going to see more and more persons being involved in agricultural theft. But we hope with these measures being put in place in terms of prevention and detection and tracking, that a dent can be placed in what has become a scourge on agriculture, and that is theft. We hope that we can reduce those numbers significantly enough that people can see it feasible to engage in agriculture. And I know it was mentioned here earlier, the CARE program, the feed program. This is something, Mr. Speaker, that I've been encouraging in St. Andrew. Just as recently as last month, I would have acquired a piece of land from the church. The church decided to give a piece of land to the community that they can use for the CARE program, that they can use for agriculture. And I spoke to the young people in the community, and everyone I spoke to was on board. Persons are eager to get involved in agriculture because they see it as a way of making a living, especially in these certain times where things are getting difficult. People see now the value in agriculture. But even with the enthusiasm that comes from having access to a new source of income, at the back of everyone's mind is the belief that the possibility that their produce can be stolen from them. And that's a core reality, especially in St. Andrew, where we have large isolated areas. We have vast areas that can be transformed into agricultural land. But the reality is that if you're going to plant in those areas, you don't only have to fence up the areas, you may very well have to build a house there, which is what a lot of the farmers, the small farmers within the Turner's Hall area are forced to do. They have to physically reside in the area to protect their crops, because there are no houses or anyone to see you come in or go out in the area. Very few. In fact, there are no homes, no houses at all in the Turner's Hall area, except for farmers who decide, you know what, I'm going to grow here, so I'm going to live here. Because in some cases, the fence is not going to be enough to protect your crop. And in other cases, it's easier just to build a small shanty and live there than to try to fence up 2 acres or 3 acres of land. is extremely costly. As I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be very long. I just wanted to raise the fact that we still have a challenge on our hand as it relates to pre-deal larceny. We still have to change the mindset of persons so they see it as a crime. A crime, as theft, as the Honourable Member for St. Joseph said, it's theft. When you steal someone's pumpkins or potatoes, it's just like if you break into their house and steal their money. We have to look at it like that. Now, if we can do that, we can perhaps change the attitude and change the culture within our communities. So as I close, I want to once again commend this bill. It really is a step in the right direction in terms of the seriousness that we take in protecting farmers in this country, protecting those operating in those rural spaces, working hours in the sun and in the rain to ensure that there's food on the tables of Barbadians and to support their families. It's a step in the right direction in ensuring that we can reduce our import bill. And it's a step in the right direction in promoting the empowerment of young people in our communities. Mr. Speaker and the member for St. Philip South, I commend this bill. It really is timely. This is perhaps is a time where such a piece of legislation is more required, more than ever. And I want to commend you. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Lucie.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I will not be as long as the honourable member who spoke before me, but indeed it would be remiss of me as representing a constituency which has two major projects going in terms of agriculture, the Spring Hall land lease and the project at Montporier, where a number of persons, a number of young people continue to ask to be involved. It would be remiss of me if I did not share a perspective on this. And I speak so, Mr. Speaker, from the standpoint that I had some experience in agriculture as a little boy. As I grew up, very often in summer vacation time or any vacation time that we had, I had to be part of what my mother was doing as a small farmer, whether it was planting sugarcane or reaping sugarcane, planting yams or sweet potatoes. I had to be part of that. So I understand the hard work at that point in time, which had to go into agriculture. Perhaps it may be a bit easier now with all the mechanical tools and things that are available. But that time you had to use the hoe, the fork, etc. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would also want to commend and highly commend the Honourable Member for St. Philip South and the Minister of Agriculture and his team, both at BAMC, BADMC, and whatever other agencies there are that have helped him and helped this government in turn to get this far, to reach this point in agriculture, in the agricultural sector. Because we have come a long way, we are seeing progress, we are seeing movement, we are seeing growth in this sector, and it's making a very, very valuable and invaluable contribution to the economy, the economic activity of Barbados. He has done well. I sat indeed in that ministry, even though briefly, and I was present at the many meetings, and I saw the challenges as well that the Honourable Minister had, but he pushed through. And we have come, Mr. Speaker, to this particular point, and I want to commend him highly in that regard. Now, we have a fancy name, or two fancy words moving around here today. We heard quite a lot of pre-deal larceny. and so on. But in short, in Bajan parlance, it's thieving. Thieving what don't belong to you, taking up what ain't yours. And I had an experience, Mr. Speaker. I was nowhere near politics. Wasn't thinking about politics, wasn't thinking about representation. And night as I was coming to a meeting, a community meeting, I remember in the district of Crab Hill and coming across Friendship Road, I saw a vehicle parked next to the land lease. And men were moving with tomatoes, bags of tomatoes, like they belonged to them. I wasn't sure. So I stopped and I kept on my lights and I watched. When they recognized that somebody was behind them and they wouldn't pass because they were calling me out and I wouldn't move, they got in the vehicle and moved off and gone a little further down. Now, I moved on behind them, but I didn't sure what they had in terms of a tool or whatever, right? So I went past them, Mr. Speaker, but I called back the Crab Hill police station and asked them, yes, I called back the Crab Hill police station and tell them some activity going on out there by the land lease, go and check whether that was people hard labor. Certainly it could not be the person who was working any of that land out there because they would not have to come in the self of night. They would have gone to reap the crop during the day, so it had to be somebody thieving. Mr. Speaker, as well, they had another farmer at Mount Poyer who had some nice cherry tomatoes, and cherry tomatoes are more expensive than the ordinary tomatoes. And the thief or thieves went in and then picked the tomatoes because you got to go lower down to the ground to pick them. So what they do, they slashed the vines and loaded the vines and took them away. And when that farmer went back the next day to reap some tomatoes to fulfill an order they had from one of the hotels, there was none. And this sort of thing is heartbreaking to a farmer. So therefore, this government is moving in the right direction. The Honourable Member of Minister of Agriculture is moving in the right direction to putting these things in place, Mr. Speaker, to help farmers out there. But I want to add, as much as the government may do, and I support fully the contribution for the Honourable Member for St. James South, as much as the government may do, Mr. Speaker, the farmers have got to come together and help themselves. This cannot be a crab mentality approach. You got to come together. There's a problem. You have to come together and help yourself. Help yourself to save some dollars. I know agricultural produce, as far as I'm told, can make some good money. Equally, you can have some serious losses too. So what the farmer has got to be prepared to do, as he has invested his time and so on in those crops, he has to do a bit more. And I support the technology, I support the legislation. But equally, the farmer has to invest some dollars, Mr. Speaker, to protect his property, just like you would invest to protect your home with cameras and whatever else. The farmer's got to do that too. The farmers have got to come together and do that. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend highly the Honourable Minister. I want to commend the government for moving in this regard. I want to commend everyone who's been involved in pushing and raising this agricultural sector from the level, this ministry from the level where it was at to where it is today and where it's pushing towards. I am obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first of all want to start by thanking all those honorable members who very eruditely contributed to this debate today in support of this bill, the Protection of Agricultural Products Bill 2022. And I say so because today we all sang from the same hymn sheet, and that is very important to note. The very coherent approach to addressing this bill was at the same time sharing various divergent views in response to various sections of the bill, but yet still not in criticism of what we are hoping to achieve. And I think that is important. There were, however, a couple of areas that were questioned, and I am pleased to report. The Attorney General, the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, did mention that someone messaged and asked about the 5-kilogram quantities. This morning, when I spoke, I mentioned that we did extensive consultation. And coming away from the consultation with the Barbados Sugar Industry Limited, they are of the view that you can't only see sugarcane as sugarcane in commercial quantities for a factory, but that there are people who use sugarcane to peel, cut, and bag for commercial purposes as well. And that is the reason why the number is at 5 kilograms. Because the idea here is to also address being able to harvest, peel, cut, and package sugarcane for sale for what I consider to be raw consumption, or what we call sucking sugarcane. Therefore, I trust that that is enough to explain why we have it at 5 kilograms. The other question that was raised was the rapid response unit in the Barbados Police Service. Again, when the Attorney General spoke this afternoon, he mentioned the successes we've had with the work the Barbados Police Service is doing through Operations Bird's Eye, and that program is in place with the Barbados Police Service and the Barbados Defense Force. And they will continue. We have also consulted with the Commissioner of Police, and they are satisfied that this can work rather than having to appoint predatory larceny wardens within the Ministry of Agriculture advising the Barbados Police Service. In terms of the FAO project with the chip and pin, we have done the consultation for the traceability. We have carried out the work with vet services, and it is only for us now to receive the chips for the animals, so that that program is already ongoing. I believe that the FAO will provide us with those chips so that we can start through the veterinary services, the program to start tagging or placing the pins in the animals. And then the other one that was raised by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central was the issue of taking an animal to the abattoir where that animal could be slaughtered. But at section 3.1 of the bill, we spoke to how an animal, or well, agricultural products can be sold and be purchased or for the purposes of conveyance. So that if I take, Mr. Speaker, your animal to the abattoir should respectfully ask for the same documents. But their failure to do so would mean that that animal I will have to be using for personal consumption. because if this is to be worth what is intended to do, my ability to sell that meat will be hindered by the fact that I can't produce those documents unless I forge those documents, and then that is getting into fraud, where in actual fact, then if convicted, you're subject to $100,000 in fines, 5 years in prison, or both. So, and the bill itself is really seeking to simplify the process. So that's the reason why you would find that the language that is being used does not put you in a position where you have to then turn around and define what everything else is. So if it had said to an abattoir, then you have to then turn around and define what abattoir means in this bill, and you go on and on and on and on and on. And I think, like the Attorney General said, we have done various iterations of this bill to be able to arrive at where we are, but I'm equally prepared, if necessary, to make changes as recommended. So far, so good. I believe that this really is addressing the issues with predial larceny and will go a long way in helping us to mitigate the challenges that farmers face with predial larceny. But I have to put back on record that the legislation on its own will not be the only means through which we can address the problems of predial larceny. And so therefore, we have to take responsibility as people. I think Barbadians now have to reach the level of maturity where they themselves want to participate in making sure that the very thing they complain about and criticize the government for, they can participate in making sure it becomes a reality. And this, Mr. Speaker, will become a reality if Barbadians play their part by making sure they look for source of supply. And source of supply will be through the recommended documentation that is required at the point of sale, at the point of purchase, at the point of conveyance. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to note that we have reached this point, and it will be remiss of me if I didn't first of all thank the CPC for the work that they have done in really guiding us through this process. Because for as much as the Attorney General did say that they're not agriculturalists, we are not lawyers either. So we needed each other. And this process took us from 2018, when I became minister, through going to Parliament, to Cabinet, in 2019, being halted by the COVID pandemic in 2020 and 2021, going back to Cabinet, though, in 2020, and then having to go back again for the final draft of the bill before receiving the Attorney General's certificate. And I also wish to thank the learned Attorney General for the work and support he has given, because he literally took this bill and stripped it apart in a meeting with us to make sure that we were comfortable with what we were presenting in order for us to come to this honorable chamber to have this debate today, and I wish to thank him. Above all else, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all of those stakeholders who participated in the consultations we had. The one at the Savannah Hotel was well attended by all of the major farmers, small farmers, interest groups, and the Vendors Association as well, and the Barbados Police Service. The other consultations we had, again, we brought back all of the farmers, the major farmers, the BAMC, the BSIL. We had the police service again, and we made sure that at each time we went through the bill to get to where we are. And the tremendous amount of support we got from all stakeholders was really overwhelming, and I want to thank them. I want to especially thank the newly appointed Commissioner of Police for the leadership that he brought to this. When I first requested to meet with him, I did so at the very last minute, and he made himself available. And out of the conversation we had, he was able to guide us with the Barbados Defense Force to where we needed to get to in terms of implementing the announcement that the Prime Minister made in 2020 by establishing a unit within the Barbados Police Service. And his response was that the fastest way we can get to this, if we're going to make it meaningful, was to put in place Operation Birdseye. And that is where he brought back the police and the defense force to patrol all those farms that were complaining for crop theft, and to also go and visit the farmers, the managers, etc., to find out what times they are being targeted, and then to set about to respond. And Mr. Speaker, I am eternally grateful to him. And all in all, I want to say that I really have a tremendous team at the Ministry of Agriculture. Let me say that there are times when they may think that I'm pushing them too hard, but I never told anybody that I'm going to come and complain about how hard I am being pushed. And really and truly, I need not do that because I accepted to be Minister of Agriculture. And if we have a responsibility to deliver and be nimble, then that is what I intend to do. So I just want my team to understand that there are times when we have to get things done, and I will not be as, how should I say? I will not be as soft as I may look in dealing with the situation. And I will try my best not to make people uncomfortable, but at the same time make sure we can achieve our objectives. And it's never going to be perfect, but they work very hard. And that perception that was out there in the public about we have more doctors in the Ministry of Agriculture, yet we don't achieve anything, is an absolute myth. Because the work that I see coming out of my ministry, not only in the central government, but right through the SOEs as well, is a tremendous turnaround from what was made to be a perception out there in public that they do not perform. Now, I would be the first to say to you that if under the previous administration, that perception was created because the focus was not the same focus that we have now to rebuild a sector and increase production, I understand. But that certainly cannot be the case now. And I wish sincerely to thank my Permanent Secretary, Chief Agriculture Officer, and all the officers in my ministry, including the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, for the time that he was there, for all the work that we have done in getting here. And I wish to thank Barbadians for their support. Many Barbadians have supported me as I spoke about this bill, including going on the radio program to speak about it to the public. And I want to thank Barbadians. Not everybody is going to support me. There are those people who will be waiting with daggers in hand for me to pass by only to slam it in my back. And there are those people who will also be waiting up front to see how fast they can cut my throat. But such is the nature of public life. And so therefore, I am not daunted at all. And I want to thank Barbadians sincerely for the support they have been giving my ministry and giving me as minister. And Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I beg that this bill be read a third time.
Second time, honourable member.
Pardon?
A second time.
A second time. Second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do now leave the chair for this House to resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, call in groups of 5. Clauses 1 to 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 5 do stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 10.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that clauses 6 to 10 do stand part.
The question is that clauses 6 to 10 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 11 to 15.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 11 to 15 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 11 to 15 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule of the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule of the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All members in favour? All members against, please say no. I do now report to His Honour. Methinks the ayes have it, sorry.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable member St. Philip's House.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I do beg to move the passing and citing as one bill the protection of agriculture and produce and protection of agricultural produce bill, Act 2022.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, recommittal of papers.
Honourable member for St. Peter.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the 17th actuarial review for the National Insurance Fund, the Unemployment Fund, and the Severance Fund as of December 31st, 2020.
Government notices.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the Barbados Optional Savings Bonds Plus offer to the public bill 2020. To give notice, sir, to give notice. Of the Barbados Optional Savings Bonds Plus offer to the public bill 2022.
Mr. Speaker, I'm commanded to give notice of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225 of Barbados, the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of the parcel of land, the property of the state, situated at Brighton in the parish of St. George, in this island for housing development.
We commit to first readings of bills.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Barbados Optional Savings Bonds Plus offer to the public bill 2022 be read the first time.
Question that the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
Revert to government business, sir.
Honourable Member St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, you can tell that I don't want to leave. This brings us to the end of our proceedings for today. Beg to move that this House do now adjourn until 10 a.m. on Friday, 12th of August. 10 a.m. Friday, 12th August.
Question that this honourable chamber be adjourned until the Friday, the 10th day of August at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. Friday the 12th of August at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 12th day of August at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.